Correct.
Hey, everybody. How's it going? Welcome to the Ben Joravsky Show. All right, Ben, what's the song of the day?
Solidarity forever. Oh, it's an old Union song, man.
Yeah, okay. Keep singing it. Keep singing it.
Solidarity for... Come on, everybody. Oh, there's only two people in this studio. Let's pretend there's more. Solidarity. That's a Union song, right? A lot of Union people coming around here today.
If you're listening on the YouTube live stream, weigh in. Tell us you hear us. Make sure we're good to go here.
Solidarity forever.
Feel free to tell Ben to stop singing. It's fine. It's fine.
I understand it. God, I can't sing. Generally, that's the first thing that comes after I start singing. Could you stop singing?
Nah.
What was the song yesterday? Whoa, here she comes. She's a man.
That was not yesterday's song.
Love Hall & Oates.
Your Ben Joravsky Show for Thursday, October 17th is moments away. But before we get into this, we need to thank the unions for sponsoring this program. First up, it's the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local 126 in District 8, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150. Big thank you to those unions for jumping on board and sponsoring this program. And, of course, today's show is brought to you by our dear friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. The Ben Joravsky Show starts now. It is Thursday, October 17th, and live from the Chicago Sun-Times Chicago Reader Studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. Today on the program, in these times, writer Miles Kampf-Lassin returns, union man Jeff Johnson is back, and I wonder what we're going to talk about with this fella. Cook County Commissioner and CTU member Brandon Johnson. And now your host, not a CTU member, but CTU supporter, Chicago Reader columnist Ben Joravsky.
Hello, everybody. Ben Joravsky here. We're calling this Clarification Thursday. And here's why. As we head into day one of the teacher strike, apparently, D, there's a misunderstanding. Some people are saying that I am biased in favor of the striking Chicago teachers. They say I'm biased because I am wearing a red hat, and red is the color of the Chicago teachers. Well, let me just say this to that. Nothing could be further from the truth. Yes, indeed, I am wearing a red hat, but it just happened to be the first hat I picked up, D. All right, I was running out the door. You know, we wear baseball caps on the Ben Joravsky Show. So just happened to pick this one, all right? Just accident, okay?
Yeah.
So no bias. Then they also say, well, yeah? How come you're wearing a red T-shirt? Oh, yeah, I am wearing a red T-shirt.
Oh.
That's just a coincidence, man.
It's underneath the black shirt that he's wearing now.
Yeah, hold on.
Oh, Ben, what are you doing? Oh, is this Mardi Gras? What are you doing?
It is, but it's a Bulls T-shirt, okay? Just happened to, take it out of the drawer. It doesn't mean anything, okay? Just, you want it now? There you go.
Good one right there. All right.
Yeah, it's just a Bulls T-shirt. Just happened to pull it out of the drawer. Love my beloved Bulls, okay? No bias. Okay, I'm wearing a red hat. And I'm wearing a red T-shirt, but it does not in any way mean that I support the teachers more than I support Lori Lightfoot in this particular conflict, dear. I just want to make that clear.
Thank you.
All right, other people say, well, what about the red phone? Okay, got the red phone, all right? Well, that's just a normal phone. Some could say I would have a bias for the Bulls. You ever think of that? I wear a lot of Bulls stuff. Do you ever notice that? So anyway, just because I'm wearing a red, excellent in today's Tribune by
there before they throw it to him. That's great. He's not wearing red. That's upsetting me, to be quite honest. I'm trying to get it going. There you
just
go.
See it. And red underwear. Can't see that either.
Okay, now I didn't tell you I was wearing red underwear. How did you know that? Okay, we've been working together too long.
Oh, here she comes.
Please stop. Okay, here we go. Let's talk about the news happening in Chicago and or Illinois this afternoon. And who are we kidding? Let's talk about the Chicago teacher strike. Yes, we knew it was coming. The mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, and the city of Chicago and the Chicago Teachers Union could not cut a deal in time. So, as promised, the Chicago teachers are striking. If any of you live right across the street from a high school, like me, you learned that way early this morning. I was sleeping. I kept hearing horns talking. Like, what the hell?
Oh, that means solidarity with the teachers.
Solidarity with the teachers.
All right.
I was sleeping, so I didn't know. So I was like, what the hell is going on?
All those people honking those horns are neutral observers, okay? They're not biased in favor of the teachers, all right? Because who would you want to be? So whose side would you want to be on? Let's see. Lawyers for rich developers or people who teach your kids? I'm a neutral. I work for the Tribune. I'm a neutral observer.
Screw the kids. Those guys got a lot of money.
Let's go with the lawyers. Anyway.
All right. So what I have here is audio. We could sit here and talk about it, but we got audio from both Lori Lightfoot. She gave a press conference a couple of hours ago. We're going to play as much as we can from this press conference here. She really gives you the crux of all of this here, so we can, we won't talk so much. But a piece of audio that we did not play yesterday, fantastic. Quite possibly the best Chicago local audio from anyone all year. Chicago Teachers Union Vice President, the one, the only, Stacey Davis Gates. She gave a press conference yesterday. And holy cow, I love Stacey Davis Gates. She's so awesome. So we're going to play, before we play Lori's press conference today, giving us the latest here, let's hear from Stacey Davis Gates. She really does paint a picture as to why the teachers are striking here. So Stacey Davis Gates, take it away. My God, you were badass.
The same goals that we have in the contract currently is what they put in writing. That's insufficient. Number two, the same class size committee that's currently in the contract is what she put in writing. That's insufficient. And they have not committed a dollar amount to lowering class sizes. There are 1,300 oversized classrooms in the city of Chicago right now. If you go on the south side to Chatham, there are almost 40 students in a kindergarten classroom. If you go to the 10th Ward on the southeast side of town, you can go in a classroom with 36 kids in a kindergarten classroom. And you know what's even more offensive this morning is that they have nurses coming into our schools on tomorrow to be with students, but she cannot put a nursing ratio in a contract. No. This is not a joke, people. This team, our team of 40, we have been asking, begging, organizing, demanding the same things for the last 10 years. And she should know because her team, her campaign team, copy and pasted every single demand that we've put forth for the last 10 years into a campaign platform. She has given speech after speech about resourcing neighborhood schools, providing nurses and librarians, and yet we're standing here talking about a mayor who knew it was her job when she ran to be mayor, knew it was her job to transform the Chicago public schools. So she can put a nurse in a classroom in the school building when it's empty, but can't put one in there when it's full of students. Next question.
Next question.
Stacey Davis. Next question. Listen, I mean, I know I'm supposed to be a neutral observer, but
yeah, that's not the window.
It's hard to argue with anything Stacey Davis Gates said there. You know, I was talking to a Lori Lightfoot supporter yesterday, and this supporter was saying that everybody favors having more nurses in the schools, Ben. Well, the reality is that is not true. If everybody favored having more nurses or more librarians or more social workers or more counselors in the Chicago public schools, we would have them. We would have had them already. We've lived through 20, 30 years of all-powerful mayors, Daley and Rahm, who were free to do whatever they wanted pretty much without any restrictions, no opposition whatsoever. They appointed the school board, so the school board was compliant, and they controlled the city council, so the city council was compliant, and they were reelected every time they ran. So they were free to do whatever they wanted. Guess what? They did not, on their own, add nurses, social workers, counselors, and librarians to our classrooms. They did not, on their own, add more teachers to the schools so that we would have less overcrowding. They didn't do it on their own when they're free to do it. It is taking a teacher strike to do it. And I've said this all along. The absolute worst place and way to deal with these critical issues of inequity that our schools confront that make poor neighborhoods at such a disadvantage to wealthy neighborhoods, the absolute worst way to deal with this is a teacher strike. But absent a teacher strike, our city would not confront these issues. So I tell you, I'm trying to find my inner Tribune and be quote unquote neutral on this one. Neutral, but it's really hard to argue with the logic of Stacey Davis Gates.
Nothing has changed. The offer is just, let me copy what's already in the contract, let me paste it to a new sheet of paper, and let me say that this is a worthy counterproposal.
You see what's already in the contract, the previous contract.
The one we're in right now. Listen, I've told you all this a million times before. Her team, their strategy is to take back everything that we've already won in previous contracts and offer it back to us with percentages, not with what we have already, not what our students deserve or what we're demanding, but the same thing or less. That's the problem here. There is a gross disconnection between what she says and what's on the table.
Damn, she's cool.
Well, here's the other thing. I would add my observation. I don't know if Stacey Davis Gates would agree with me in this point, but essentially the Mayor Lightfoot and her aides and her advisors and her supporters in the media are telling the teachers, shut up and take the money. So here's Stacey Davis Gates arguing on behalf of adding nurses, counselors, social workers, librarians, etc. And clearly Lori Lightfoot does not want to make that contractual obligation to hiring them, because if she does make that contractual obligation to hiring them, then they got to dedicate money to them. And so she would rather have that freedom not to have to hire all these other new employees. And so essentially they're saying to the teachers, take the money and shut up. And I've said this many times. For the last 20 years, the reformers who are preaching more charter schools have branded teachers as selfish and greedy. And I can recall editorials written in newspapers in this town saying that teachers are essentially in it for the money. They're asking for too much money. In fact, I could recall some editorials right now and articles in the paper arguing that somehow or other teachers are overpaid in the city of Chicago right now at this very time. So here you have the teachers on strike for issues that are not directly related to money in their pocket. And what is the cultural elite, the civic elite of Chicago saying? Shut up and take the money. So it's funny. If the teachers are damned if they say they want more money, and they're damned if they say we want more nurses, counselors, and librarians. Essentially, the city of Chicago is telling the teachers, just be quiet and let us run the show.
I love Stacey Davis Gates.
Yeah, come on.
Those reporters were not ready for that realness.
How about
Oh my. Okay. Well, that was honest.
Well, yeah. You know, Dennis, I'm going to be honest with you. Stacey Davis Gates is not messing around. By the way, just to let everybody know, Stacey Davis Gates will be our guest at the Hideout.
There you go.
September.
Oh, September. There you go, guys. Let's jump in our time machines back to September and put on our shorts, tank tops, and go see.
November 5th. Thank you.
There you go.
All right,
Tuesday, November 5th, 1354 West Wabansia.
Very good.
Stacey Davis Gates at the Hideout. Maya Dukmasova making her first Tuesday co-host debut. Holy cow.
Oh my God, that's two powerful women in one setting. So it should be a great show. Stacey, let's hope the teacher strike's over by then.
No kidding. Who knows where we'll stand by then, but Stacey Davis Gates, well, you know she'll be honest, everybody.
Yeah, she'll be honest.
All right, so to the other side of things here, Lori Lightfoot, the mayor, gave a press conference this morning. Mm-hmm. And, well, this is where we give a shout-out to the Chicago Sun-Times one and only Fran the Woe Man Spielman. She was front and center for this press conference. You can hear her loud and clear here, standing right by the mayor.
Wait, hold on. Fran Spielman, who has a podcast on this very Sun-Times network, that Fran Spielman?
Ben, let me just say, I am so proud of you right now.
Fran
Look
Spielman,
at you.
Who
sell that podcast.
Fran Spielman, whose podcast is recorded right here in this very studio.
Yeah, that Fran Spielman.
Fran Spielman, who shares the studio with us. That Fran Spielman?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
Fran Spielman has a podcast now. She's our new studio roommate. She comes in on Fridays, and the episode is available by Friday evening. I
just want to say to Fran Spielman, these delicious almond butter biscuits.
Oh, they are really good.
Feel free to have one and share it with your guests.
Get them while you can before this broke-ass producer takes them home.
Mark Sims. Let's shout out to Mark Sims for dropping them off, right, D?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so like I said, Fran the Woman Spielman. Well, she was talking with Lori Lightfoot there. Shout out to her. She killed it today on this press conference. Let's go ahead and start. I have 4 clips from this morning's press conference.
Mayor, the newspaper editorials have both said stand strong, hang tough, easy for them to say, of course. But do you think they've also suggested, at least our paper has, that you might have made a mistake in promising the raise and raising the raise so early on? Where do you go from here without really bankrupting the store?
We're not moving any further on money because we can't. I thought it was important for us, after we went through the fact-finding process, to advance a very fair and generous compensation package for our teachers, and we believe that we've done that. So I'm hopeful that we'll continue discussions and that this strike will be limited in duration. But from a financial standpoint, we always have to keep in mind the taxpayers. CPS is just on the other side of a pretty significant crisis, and we don't have unlimited resources. But having said that, we put very generous offers on the table, both for teachers and support personnel, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to bring them back to the table and resolve all the other open issues. Truthfully, over the last couple of weeks, we really haven't been talking about compensation at all. What we've been talking about is a series of other ancillary issues. More recently, the 2 issues that they asked us to focus on, class sizes and staffing, I thought we made actually significant progress on in responding back and forth to their expressed desires around those 2 issues. So really the focal point has been non-compensation issues. So I feel good about that, but we need to get back to the table and get a deal done.
Yes, the focus has been non-compensation issues. Absolutely. As I've been saying, class size and wraparound employees, the teachers' unions on strike on basically those 2 issues. Now, let me just point this out. In defense of Lori Lightfoot, okay, here we go. In defense of Lori Lightfoot's strategy, by law, the teachers are not allowed to negotiate around class size or wraparound services. They're certainly not allowed to strike on them. So obviously, Lori Lightfoot's strategists and advisors who've been through a few of these teacher negotiations were advising her, hey, look, Mayor, what we'll do, we'll give them some money. They can't strike on the other thing. They'll take the money, boom, bada bing, bada boom. Somehow or other, making Lori's advisors sound like someone from The Sopranos. Hey, you know what you got to do? Hey, bada boom, bada bing.
Here's the situation.
Here's the situation. But they didn't realize they got Stacey Davis Gates on the other side. So the teachers have taken the position that that class size and wraparound services can be negotiated and will be negotiated. And so now Lori Lightfoot has to decide how far she's going to push this. Will she go all the way and say, hey, you can't do that, and go to court to seek an injunction to force the teachers back? That's a possible strategy. I hope it doesn't get to that. So I'm defending Lori Lightfoot. She was bowing to the prevailing wisdom. And isn't it interesting that editorial boards, man, we'll talk about Monday morning quarterbacking. Now there's a strike and it's like things are rough. They're like second guessing Lori. You were with Lori all the way, guys. Now things are a little rough. You're backing. Well, I'm nervous. It's nervous. The teachers went on strike. I mean, guys, you were with her. You were saying, be tough, hey, teachers, shut up and take the money. The teachers didn't shut up and take the money, and now you're like, second guessing going on there. It's like Bear fans all second guessing Ryan Pace, who's the general manager of the Bears, who thought it was a good idea to trade up to take Mitch Trubisky as opposed to taking 2 of the greatest quarterbacks you could have taken from that generation. I know I'm not allowed to talk sports.
Let's wrap it up. Come on.
Which is a worse decision? A Lori Lightfoot not agreeing to hire more nurses, social workers, and counselors, or the Bears trading up to take Mitch Trubisky?
I like how you're trying to sneak off the island here. Bears fans. Dude, you're a Bears fan. That's you.
Love the Bears. I hate saying it. I love the Bears.
Come on.
But come on. It's true. Editorial board. You take a stand, take the stand. Don't go, nervous now. I have to back off. Anyway, good question.
On the picket line, there are teachers and support staff today saying, these are the things that the mayor campaigned on, putting a nurse in every school, a librarian in every school.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to those folks who think that you maybe reneged on promises or you're not following through on these campaigns?
Well, I think what they need to do is go to our offer, cps.edu/our offer, because what you'll see there is that we've made good on the things that I said during the campaign. Back at the end of August, the Chicago Public Schools Board voted on a budget that allocated substantially more nurses, counselors, case management. More recently, we told the union, and maybe they haven't fully communicated that to their membership, that not only that, we hadn't stopped, we were continue hiring. The numbers of personnel that are in our schools, the year-over-year increase is substantial. Plus, we added another $400,000 every year to create the pipeline to be able to actually fill those positions. So we've made good on what we've said. We're going to continue to press forward. We know that these additional resources are important. What I've asked repeatedly is for Jesse Sharkey and the CTU to join us in helping fulfill the pipeline, to go to college campuses, to do the recruiting. They haven't taken us up on that, but we're not going to wait. We're going to continue doing what we say.
By the way, there's a couple subtle. You got to give Lori Lightfoot credit. She's she's pretty good. She threw a couple subtle jabs there. She said, "Well, perhaps the union hasn't fully communicated this to its members." In other words, good, terrible job, Jesse Sharkey. And then she names Jesse, didn't name Stacy. Notice that, because Jesse's the president, Stacy's only quote unquote the vice president. So I'm not going to even mention Stacey Davis Gates, even though I think more and more in the public's mind, Stacey Davis Gates is emerging as the face of the Chicago Teachers Union. All right, here's the deal on that, folks. I'm just going to help you out on this one a little bit. I've been following budgets in the city of Chicago for 2 gazillion years. All right, there's a difference between saying you're going to put in a budget a position for nurses and actually hiring a nurse. All right? That's a difference. People do it all the time. Mayors do it all the time. They open up job vacancies. Why? Because those vacancies, and they don't fill those vacancies. The money comes in, they can spend it on something else. So the teachers union is asking the mayor and her board of education to make a contractual obligation to hire nurses, social workers, counselors, and the mayor doesn't want to make that contractual, or she hasn't wanted to make that contractual obligation. Maybe she'll change her mind. I would applaud her if she did change her mind. I'd be your biggest supporter, D. I wouldn't be wearing a red hat. What's Lori's colors? I don't know. Lori's from Ohio, so it'd be like, red, because Ohio State. Okay, I'd be wearing a red Ohio State hat for Lori if she put it in the contract. So that's the difference. The difference between saying I'm making a commitment to hire and making a contractual obligation to hire. And one more time, I'll point this out, pointing this out. We have a contractual obligation to pay for the lawyers at the Sterling Bay Lincoln Yards development. D, that's a contractual obligation. It's part of the deal we cut with them, all right? So if it's good enough for their lawyers, it's good enough for the nurses in the public schools.
So to recap, listeners, if, for the CTU, so he wears a red hat, but if he went over to Lori, he would also wear a red hat.
Yeah, well,
poignant.
But you know what? I put on my Bears cap because Lori's a huge Bears fan. Remember she explained that? Yeah. So I wear my Bears hat for Lori.
All right, I got 2 more clips to play, and the following 2 clips, good stuff, bud. All right, the following 2 clips here is when Fran Spielman just rolls up her sleeves and says, "Get out the way, rookies! I'll show you how to get a scoop."
Every day that a strike goes, Mayor, doesn't it hurt you too?
No.
Because the pressure comes from the parents, and they're going to blame everybody, right?
No, I don't see it that way, and I don't look at it that way. This isn't about politics for me. This is about making sure that we are protecting our children, that we're providing a safe and nurturing environment for them, and that we get a deal done that both respects the teachers and the support staff, honors our fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers, and then puts in place a good, solid foundation for our children on which to continue to grow and thrive.
Would we
the
be
politics
if
doesn't matter.
Tony Preckwinkle were the mayor?
I can't speculate about that.
Mayor,
Yes,
at this
Becca.
point, is school off tomorrow? If not, when will you announce that?
Yeah, we until we get notification from the CTU that they're intending to come back to the classroom, school is canceled for the duration.
Mayor,
Let me go back. Let me go back here.
Mayor,
Yeah.
you said yesterday that you thought that this strike had been in the works for a while. Short of giving them everything they wanted on their first offer, was this strike inevitable in your mind?
Well, I don't want to speculate about what was the intention of the CTU, but there's a deal that could have been had. We could have had this deal at the end of August. We could have had it in September. We could have had it any time in October. If you really want to avoid a strike, you actually ramp up the bargaining days, you stay at it night and day, you talk about the main issues, you actually give counter proposals and not just reject what's on the table. There's a real back and forth and dialogue. We saw a little bit of that in the waning days before the strike started, but it certainly wasn't there early on. That's the seriousness of purpose that we have to need, a sense of urgency to get this deal done. And I hope that when we return to the bargaining table, that sense of urgency will be there, because there's a sense of urgency, certainly on our part.
All right, a sense of urgency. Well, obviously, it wasn't that much urgency because the teachers are on strike. Look, I always get a little nervous when mayors talk about fiduciary responsibilities to taxpayers. First of all, I love the word fiduciary. Yeah. I remember where I was when I first heard the word fiduciary. It was 1981, D. I was sitting on Milo. I'm going to shout out to my good friend Milo, my longtime friend. We were sitting on the front porch of his house, and his friend Roger was behind us. And I believe marijuana was being smoked. D.
Oh, okay.
Marijuana.
81? You weren't, though, because you haven't smoked since 1979.
I think it was 81. I may have been partaking.
Okay, all right.
Anyway, we're talking about
the last time you smoked marijuana.
The Chicago Cubs, and how they had not invited Ernie Banks to spring training to just be Ernie Banks, the great legendary Mr. Cub, and they would cut him from the payroll. And Miles said, they're so cheap, I'm never going to support the Cubs again. And from behind us sit Roger, while smoking a joint, says, well, the Cubs have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders. I was like, whoa, fiduciary, I haven't heard that word ever. I had to look it up in the dictionary. So I love it when a mayor says fiduciary responsibility to taxpayers. I agree. Mayors have a fiduciary responsibility to taxpayers, and that's why I'm sure that Lori Lightfoot will be joining me and Miles, my next guest, and you, Dennis, in saying, stand with Amisha Patel and the Grassroots Collaborative in their lawsuit against forking over $1.3 billion for Lincoln Yards. How about a fiduciary responsibility for taxpayers on that one? All right? All right, I'll cut a deal. Here, I'm ready to cut a deal. I'm ready to make a deal. Wearing my red hat, got my red T-shirt, even though it does not show bias, okay? Just happen to have these hats. But even, I'll pretend as though they show bias. I will say, only have to hire one nurse per school. One nurse per school if you do not give the $1.3 billion for Lincoln Yards. That's a good deal, don't you think, D?
I agree.
Okay. All right. Very good. Miles is shaking his head. Yeah, I agree, too. Fiduciary responsibility to taxpayers. It starts before you start negotiating over nurses and librarians, things that taxpayers may want. Right, as opposed to handouts for lawyers for upscale developments that I don't know any taxpayer says they want to pay for. So anyway, just my thought when you get to the fiduciary responsibilities to taxpayers, D.
You could yank the deal that you have. You could do that. Now that they're on strike, you could say, all bets are off now. Will you do that?
What I want to do is make sure that we continue to have productive discussions with the union so that we can get a deal done.
Will you be at the table again?
They were at the table this morning ahead of the rally.
Mayor, how do you feel? You're heading into the budget next week. You're in a very difficult period of your administration now. I mean, the honeymoon is really over now in terms of the strike, the budget, the taxes. No, but is it? How do you feel about that? The governor and
here's what I think. I have personally gotten a lot of support from random people that I don't know, via email. Somehow somebody's sending out my cell phone number, and I'm getting text messages. But the truth is, I'm hearing a lot from CPS parents. I'm hearing a lot from teachers and support staff, that they understand that we respect them, that we put a good deal on the table, that we respect teachers, and that we should get a deal done. So I feel very good about where we are. Of course, no one wants to strike, and it'd be foolish to say it's fine. We need to get this deal done, and we need to get back to business as usual because we need to get our kids back in school.
Man, I'll tell you what, it is kind of funny. I just thinking about this. In order to get more nurses, social workers, and counselors, and librarians in the schools, teachers have to go on strike. I've never seen a developer have to go on strike to get a TIF handout, ever. I've been covering TIFs in this town since the 1980s, all right? I was just thinking about that when I was listening to Lori Lightfoot, and Fran was asking her, is the honeymoon over? Well, you know, I think Lori Lightfoot still is a very popular mayor in this town, D. I don't think she has nearly been vilified as much as Rahm Emanuel, and I'm going to give her credit. I mean, you know, I've been kind of harder for the first half hour of the show, but I'm going to give her credit. So far, she's maintained a certain amount of dignity and showed just showed some open-mindedness in her attitude toward the teachers, whereas, of course, Rahm was just, his attitude was to raise the middle finger high at the Chicago public school teacher. He made a gross miscalculation. He thought that there was an anti-teacher fervor in this town, and he could ride it all the way to who knows what his total ambitions are in the White House. So Lori Lightfoot has obviously learned on the rhetorical front not to go at the teachers hard. And by the way, she did not notice, she didn't take the bait when Fran asked her, well, you could just pull the offer from the table now, start at zero, which would, oh, there we go. We'd be like a month-long strike if that were to happen. She did not take the bait. So I'm going to give her a shout out. How about that, D?
There you go.
All right, I'm going to give her a shout out.
You got your Lori red hat on.
It's Lori red hat now, okay? So yeah, because she's from Ohio State colors, so it could go either way. It's either Chicago Teachers Union red hat or a Lori red hat. I'm like the Tribune, D. I'm neutral. All right.
All right. That's
All
a
right.
lie. All right. So, moving on here. So we got Lori there. Shout out to Fran Spielman. Let me just say, Fran, you are awesome.
Hush up, Bulldog.
Oh, my goodness.
And let's just say one more time to Fran. Fran, when you're in here sharing this, feel free to eat these delicious Nature Valley biscuits with almond butter and offer them to your guests. They're courtesy of Mark Sims. One more time, Mark Sims.
Yeah, she's going to be in here tomorrow, and the first thing she'll go, what the hell are these biscuits? Why are there almond butter biscuits here? Shout out to Steven. He weighed in on the YouTube live stream chat here, and he says, damn, Fran, she asks the tough questions and speaks truth to power. She's a great role model for all journalists and news readers. Why, yes, Steven, she is. And you can hear her every Friday right here at ChicagoSunTimes.com, the Fran Spielman podcast. She talks with guests, politicians. Hey, maybe she'll have Ben on one day.
No, that would require me getting up early on a Friday.
Okay, she's not going to have Ben on one day. Fran Spielman Show this Friday. Download it right now. Audio only, no more video, all right? And coming up next, we got Miles Kampf-Lassin. Miles Kampf-Lassin is in studio. We're going to be talking all things progressive politics and more than likely chicken sandwiches. Read the Chicago Reader to get up to speed on what's what in Chicago. Culture, food, arts and entertainment, weekly concert listings, weekly event listings, the environment, travel. I can continue, but you get the point. And for all of you Chicago political junkies, raw weekly columns on real city politics from Maya Dukmasova and our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader, free to the public in newsstands throughout the city and online at chicagoreader.com. Read it now and be a more informed Chicagoan.
Hey, everybody, what you're about to hear are the piano stylings of Jeff Manuel. Man, listen to Jeff go. Jeff Manuel has been playing piano around Chicago for years. He's played for conventions, for celebrities, played in basement bars with blues bands. He's played at prestigious social clubs, fine restaurants, and in the intimacy of private homes. Book Jeff Manuel at jeffemanuelpianist.com. Don't worry, I'll spell his name at the end of this commercial. You know what Chicago Magazine said? They said that Jeff Manuel is, quote, as comfortable with Chopin as he is with Cole Porter. He's excellent and his performance is joyous. He offers an elegant stream of compositions and interpretations that entertains the mind but won't hurt the ears. To hear more of Jeff Manuel's work and to book Jeff for your next event, go to jeffmanuelpianist.com. I'm going to spell it out for you, people. J-E-F-F. M as in Mary, A, N as in Nancy, UELPIANIST.com. Take it away, Jeff Manuel.
Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show. Live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
Miles Kampf-Lassin from In These Times in the studio. He's every Thursday talking politics with us. Miles, are you wearing red today? Is that red?
It is.
Is
Well,
red.
you know, it could be an Ohio State red. We don't.
Yeah,
It's actually this is a Chicago Bulls red. I'm excited. We're going to be a heck of a season.
Yes, Chicago Bulls, and we're going to take the deep dive in politics, but I just have to say, folks, if you're a Bulls fan, check out the Joe Colley interview we dropped on Saturday, right?
Apparently some of you are Bulls fans, because, we have quite a few downloads for the Joe Colley podcast.
Yeah, Joe Colley being the beat writer from the Sun-Times. He's a great guest. I'll tell you what, he does not pull punches. Like the Fran Spielman when it comes to covering the Bulls. He's not afraid to tell it like it is what he has to say. So I urge everybody to check it out. And we're going to bring Joe back for tomorrow. We're going to do an interview with Joe. He's going to give us preseason predictions.
Oh, great.
Howley, who can be more accurate with their
Wow.
The winner, I'll buy him waffles at that Waffle House down the street. How about that? All right.
Not the Waffle House. We don't have a Waffle House.
Well, I was walking down the street and I passed a restaurant that said waffles. I went in and the people coming out goes, man, these waffles are good.
I guarantee there's no actual Waffle House at the West Loop.
No,
We haven't gotten those to Chicago yet, only in the South. But,
no, but this is just a restaurant that says waffles, and I love waffles and eggs. Anyway, all right, Miles, let's talk teacher strike. Your general thoughts.
It's happening. I was out this morning at a couple picket lines. I went to Logandale Elementary and then to Yates, both kind of the northwest side near my neck of the woods, and it's just flashbacks to 2012. I mean, you see the energy; it's electric out on the streets. Every vehicle passing by, honking, raising fists, screaming out. The teachers had brought a massive speaker and were just bumping tunes, and so they're dancing in the picket line. I mean, I think that Lori Lightfoot's approach so far has kind of been to say, we don't have the money, and that's still where they're at. Today, I was, interested to hear what Dennis just played there, where she said nobody wants a strike. That's good to hear. That's not what she had been saying before. She had been saying, teachers sound like they want to strike. They're determined to strike, as if this was some pre-planned operation. Like, this is clearly the result. The reason 94% of the membership voted to strike is because they see that their demands are not being met at the bargaining table. And because having an exciting strike, where you're expressing your solidarity with your fellow workers and teachers, that's a good thing. It's not like people should be dour on the picket line. That's not how, labor actions work. It's a good thing to show that there's energy. And as the Sun-Times poll the other day showed, I mean, the public is with the teachers more than they're with the mayor. And, I heard her saying she's getting texts and emails from people that are supporting her, and I'm sure that that's true, but I think by and large, the longer this goes on, I cannot imagine that she's going to be in a stronger bargaining position. I mean, what she said is that, there's no more money. That's what she just said. And that is so, at the same time she's putting together the budget that she's going to present, you make money, you make investments. That's what a contract is. It's looking forward years in the future. I mean, this is what they're putting forward, a 5-year contract. You would expect that they would be willing to make some concessions to these teachers around things outside of just pay, when that's what Lori Lightfoot ran on. That she was just inaugurated in May. Her whole agenda was based on equity and justice, and talking about fully funding public education, talking about investing in affordable housing, talking about strengthening sanctuary. These are all the demands that the teachers are making. So for her to not do that now, it just seems as if she's abandoning her pledges. And I think that that's what the public sees, and I think that's why the strike, I had a Lyft driver last night, and he hadn't been following it very well, but the way he put it, he said, in 2012, the teachers went on strike, they Rahm wanted to go after him, and they slapped him. He's like, I think they might end up slapping her too.
Yeah.
I just thought, well, that's one way to put it. I can't imagine a resolution to this right now that puts her in a stronger position.
Well, there's a conventional wisdom in this city right now when they take a look at where we're at with this teacher strike, that the teachers went on strike to send a message to Lori Lightfoot that they're here too. She has to pay attention to them, and that just because they backed Tony Preckwinkle and she got mopped by Lori Lightfoot can't take them for granted. I'm a little hesitant to jump along. Well, take that out. I'm very hesitant to jump onto that bandwagon of conventional wisdom because I think it takes a lot to get people to willingly give up a paycheck, and I don't think so many teachers would go on a picket line just to support Stacey Davis Gates' vendetta against Lori Lightfoot or Jesse Sharkey's vendetta against Lori Lightfoot. So I feel that's an overplayed hand. But I do think, I get your thoughts on this, that there's some parallels between the way Democratic mayors of Chicago govern and the way Democratic presidential candidates, the centrists, are appealing for votes. Lori Lightfoot is essentially saying, when she ran for office, she said more nurses, social workers, and counselors, and yet it took a strike for her to get to the point where she says, "I'll put that in the contract." It took a strike, Miles, to get her to say that. When I see her holding back on these commitments, even though people want them, I have echoes in my mind of Amy Klobuchar and various moderate Democrats, Pete Buttigieg, saying, we can't go too far where our base, 85% of the base, the Democratic base, wants health care for all. We can't go too far. Yeah. We can't go too far. There's only so much money. And I'm just like, when are Democrats ever going to take the lead and be as powerful and passionate in their convictions as Republicans are with theirs?
Yeah, and this is where the rubber meets the road, right? She's in office. She ran on those things. She ran on this pretty broad agenda in which she signed on to even many of the things that, the Grassroots Collaborative, Amisha Patel's group, was calling for. Now she won't enact these basic measures that would help to fund some of these programs. I mean, she could commit to things like a corporate head tax, things like real estate transfer tax, some of these progressive revenue items that the city can do on its own. She could also go to Springfield and push for state level changes, things like a financial transaction tax, things like a more progressive income tax in the city itself. But we have not seen that. We haven't seen her, really stick her neck out to push forward the big progressive revenue options, which are basically what people want, which is to tax the rich. I mean, Chicago is the third biggest metropolis in the country. We're the economic hub of the Midwest. There's so much money that is flowing through the city, and there's so many extremely wealthy people here. We see, Ken Griffin, he's putting money towards rebuilding the Lakefront Trail. Well, why can't we redistribute some of that wealth through taxation to fund these basic things? It's a question of priorities, right? I mean, I think that's the thing that really irks people so much, is not just seeing, as you rightly brought up, things like Lincoln Yards. It's just the city's priorities in general in terms of talking about how we need to bring business here. That's, and if we raise taxes, if we put in a corporate head tax, which was in place until 2014 when Rahm took it away. I mean, it's not like that's some crazy idea. That's something the city already had in place. We see all of these tax giveaways going to the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, all these huge economic players. Meanwhile, Chicago public school system is, almost 90% people of color. It's overwhelmingly low income. These are the same type of people that are being driven out of the city right now. We're seeing a mass exodus of poor people of color, and at the expense of them to bring in things like, these big corporate behemoths. So it's a question of what kind of city do you want to be overseeing? And if you want to just continue to have Rahm's vision of, world-class glitzy corporate metropolis that's only for the uber wealthy that can afford these giant luxury condos, then, be honest about that. But if you do want to see equity, then that's why I say rubber hits the road. She's in a position right now to make these commitments in writing. That's why they keep saying put it in a contract, because, she'll say I'm going to hire 200 new staff members, but they also say they want flexibility, which means that those staff members could just, go away once we present the budget and see, we owe a whole other bunch of money to some creditors or something. So I think that's what irks people so much when they see this, is that we're turning away from the people that are the most in need in this city and the people that have made Chicago the city that it is. If Chicago was all tech bros, nobody would want to live here. You and I would be sick of it. It's the people that give Chicago life and character are the working class people that are being taught in Chicago public schools and that have been getting screwed year after year since Renaissance 2010. Since we put in this privatization agenda, we've seen these schools be disinvested. And it's not as if a nurse in every school is some crazy demand. That was the case in Chicago public schools before these crazy cutbacks. So it's a moral document to say, we want a contract that's going to say, hey, public education actually should be fully funded, and we're going to make commitments to reach that goal, even if it means pissing off the corporate elites.
Well, I have to tell you, there was a very good column, I thought, in the Chicago Reporter by Curtis Black today. It was interesting. He went back in time and just reminiscing about some teacher strikes from the 80s. And it just brought back so many memories, Miles, that this city is always... it's always been a shortage of money when it comes to adequately funding our public schools. And now, if you go back to the 80s and the 70s even, you're talking 40 years ago, 40 plus years ago, that's a full generation of people who went through the public schools, shortchanged public schools. And so, like I said, it took a teacher strike to get the issue of nurses and counselors on the table, the threat of a teacher strike. And I don't know if that will change. If the city, let me put it this way, if the city changes the way you're talking about, and there is like a continued demographic, poor people leaving the city, wealthier people coming in the city and starting to use the public schools, we might then see a change in attitude where Chicago treats its public schools, let's say, the way people in Winnetka and Wilmette treat their public schools, where they're invested in it because their kids go to the public schools. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, they wouldn't put up with 40 kids in a kindergarten classroom, which is regularly the case in some schools. I mean, this is these are alarming conditions, I think, for pretty much anybody that hasn't grown up just getting used to it. And you're completely right. I mean, this is a decades upon decades long issue. It's not as if it started in 2010, but I think that the difference is that at the time of the last teacher strike, corporate neoliberal education reform was really that ruled the day. That's what Michelle Rhee and Eva Moskowitz and these privatizers were on the covers of all these magazines saying they have all the answers. Charters were multiplying. It was you had Cory Booker partnering with Chris Christie to put forward education privatization agenda, which is essentially a backdoor way to union bust, because you're bringing in these schools that don't have any democracy in them, that are just run by corporate profiteers, which Lord knows we saw with Uno and all these different charter operators here. And so the whole trend nationally, including by Democrats, I mean, Obama's Race to the Top program was based on that same type of model, was about starving public education. I mean, that was not the explicit goal of it, but ultimately what resulted from a lot of these programs that these privatizers put into place were decimating union membership, were leading to things like poorer conditions in the schools, less resources, higher class size. Now things are different. The tide has turned a little bit against that, and you see that in the Democratic debates too. All of these guys, even Cory Booker's running away from that, because they realize the public sentiment has turned against that. Charters never perform better statistically on test scores than public schools did. And as we saw in Chicago now, the charters are being unionized by the CTU. So it's kind of like, what is their use anymore? So it has changed the playing field a little bit. I think it allowed the teachers to go on offense a little bit more and say, we're going to have to win back some of these things that have been cut out of our schools for so many years, and not only demand them back, but have a brighter vision, going forward, where, they're open to creating pathways to getting a nurse in every school, but that should be a gold standard. You shouldn't, have to fight for that. And as you said, you shouldn't have to go on strike for it.
Well, and before we'll switch to national politics, but I'll just leave it with this. I don't know how long this teacher strike will go on. I don't know how contentious it'll get. I don't know if there could be a reconciliation and a deal cut over the weekend. We'll have Brandon Johnson in here from the Chicago Teachers Union in about a half hour. We'll be asking him some of these questions. But I do know this, that if Chicago continues to finance it's not just its schools, but its services in general with regressive taxes, it just puts greater pressure on the people who could least afford it to pay the obligations and bills that having decent government require. And it's a really difficult situation that Chicago's face. And I'm not let's put it this way, I don't minimize what Lori Lightfoot is confronting. I think it's clear that so far her instincts are not of the Bernie Sanders variety on these issues, or the Elizabeth Warren variety on these issues. It's pretty clear she's more of an Amy Klobuchar type.
Well, in fact, she spoke out against the Warren style of politics, and that, in the, what was that, the Sun Times or something? She was quoted as saying, we don't want to go too far left. Pritzker as well. Lori Lightfoot.
Lori Lightfoot said.
Yeah.
I missed that quote. I didn't see that. I know, and I'm not saying that Lori Lightfoot has endorsed Amy Klobuchar. And all my Amy Klobuchar fans out there, we love you too. But anyway,
all three of you.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the goings on. Yeah, I know Miles makes it no secret he's a bit of a Bernie Sanders fan, and a big day for Bernie the other day. AOC gave him her endorsement. So
I think that this is is to be expected. I think we've started to see the way the media would respond to this, which is that they're trying to downplay it basically and say, "Oh, this was always going to happen," or some of these commentators are saying, "Oh, it's for the best that Elizabeth Warren didn't get the endorsement of the squad of AOC and Ilhan Omar, because it would just drag her down and show, there's more of a rift in the party, and Trump would be able to call this the new face of the Democratic Party." That all misses the point. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is one of the most popular figures in Democratic politics right now, and certainly that was one of the most sought-after endorsements in this primary. I mean, obviously, getting Barack Obama's support would be a pretty big deal, but next to that, AOC is pretty close to the top, and Bernie Sanders got it on the same night that he had what has been called out even by some of these centrist commentators as a pretty spectacular performance. I mean, I thought that was a very helpful display of the current dynamics in the race, where you have people like Pete Buttigieg and Joe Biden attacking Medicare for all and using these same cynical arguments. I mean, there was a report out recently that showed Joe Biden had partnered with this centrist think tank Third Way, which has long pushed for Democrats to embrace this kind of Bill Clinton Democratic Leadership Council style of triangulation and centrist moderate politics, to do a survey to find out what will piss people off about Medicare for all. How can we paint Medicare for all as unpopular? And what they found was, we just talk about freedom. It's going to take away your freedom. It's going to take away. And it's the same thing that Rahm Emanuel has talked about as well. Well, when people look at what their current healthcare situation is, when there's, 500,000 people, 500 million people going bankrupt every year because of medical debt, it's not exactly working for them. They don't have the freedom right now to, be able to change jobs.
Wait, hold on. Just back up for a second. I did not see this report, so I just want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. I did not see this particular report. Are you saying that the report was laying out a blueprint for what Democrats should say to undercut the argument of
Medicare for all?
So
being popular?
it was in other words, it was like a political campaign directive. It wasn't like policy.
No,
they weren't saying, "Oh, well, we studied this, we analyzed this. People are going to lose their freedom." They were saying, if you want to defeat this, this is the way you do.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, it was a survey that was. I mean, you can read it. It was I forget where Bloomberg might have published it, but it's out there. Yeah, Joe Biden's firm linked up with Third Way to do this survey strictly to undercut Medicare for all, because they know that Medicare for all is popular, right? Because as you said, there's like 80% of Democrats like it, so it's very difficult for Joe Biden to stand on a stage and say, "I don't want to do this," even though everybody likes it. So he has to put forward some counter to that, and it's not a compelling argument to say, "Hey, we want to have private health insurance." So instead, so they don't want to defend the for-profit health insurance industry. Instead, what they want to say is Medicare for all is actually going to steal your health care. It's going to take away 150 million people's health care, as if providing health care to everybody can be equated with taking it away. It's just it's madness when you think about it, but that's the only way that they've figured out right now to attack it. And I think we're going to see more and more of that, but I thought Bernie Sanders did a pretty good job of laying out the moral case for it, and I think that Elizabeth Warren was defending it as well. So that, to me, showed where we're at right now. There's clearly progressives in the race that are occupying the energy in the race. They're certainly directing it all as if, it's not like Joe Biden's proposals were being debated. It was all Bernie Sanders' proposals that were being debated up there.
Well, it's the interesting thing. Bernie got AOC's endorsement, and you were saying that some commentators were saying, well, that was lucky for Elizabeth Warren because that would taint her. Let's just draw it back. The current tactics of the Republican Party are to destroy any Democrat who dares to stand up to them. And they're doing this to Congressman, I don't know if you know, Adam Schiff, the congressman from Southern California who's leading the investigations into Whistleblower Gate right now, is a very mainstream centrist Democrat. I don't know if you follow this. He's by no means a AOC progressive. And yet Trump's propaganda machine is hammering him and putting that label on him. So my advice to Democrats is just to, stand up for what you believe in. You don't worry about what Donald Trump is going to say about you. He's going to say it no matter what you do. And they're going to paint Adam Schiff to be AOC. Then you know that this is not exactly, a fair and objective measure of who these politicians are.
No, that's absurd. And I guarantee you, if Elizabeth Warren is the nominee, AOC is going to endorse her, in the general election anyway. So, Trump would have that same opportunity. It's not as if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's endorsement right now is going to, would be a, some kind of scarlet letter hanging around a nominee's neck. No, it's going to bring people. Watch, Bernie Sanders is going to have this event in New York on Saturday with her, and it's going to bring out tons of people because she is magnetic. She's one of the most popular people in the Democratic Party right now, as I said, and she's a fundraising machine. She's going to help bring out more funding into the campaign, and all these organizers are inspired by her, and she was inspired by Bernie Sanders. I mean, she got her start in 2016 by being an organizer for him, and I think it's just an expression of this political revolution. People, mock that and are like, oh, Bernie was always talking about political revolution. Well, what it looks like is people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar that had never really run for office before getting involved in politics, supporting things like a Green New Deal, these massive, transformations of the economy in a progressive direction, and winning support and becoming these magnetic popular figures because of it, like that, and then being able to influence policy as well. That's, the whole debate around taxation changed once Ocasio-Cortez was talking about a 70% marginal tax rate. I mean, that's a prime example of the way that politics shifts, and I think we're seeing it happen right now. And so it's an interesting development that now those forces are going to kind of combine in this presidential campaign.
The big concern over Bernie was his health and his age. We talked about this with you and Micah a couple of weeks ago after he had the heart attack. It took him 3 days to admit it was a heart attack. There was a lot of concern on a lot of people's minds that maybe Bernie Sanders is too old to go into this race. And so I get a kick out of this because I get this comment a lot. Miles, you and Jeff Johnson, my next guest, are young. You don't get this comment, but a lot of times people see me and they go, oh, Ben, you look good, which is what people say to old people. Oh, you look good, Jeff. Nobody says that to Jeff Johnson, And so in that regard, the bar is kind of low with Bernie. People were just like, well, is Bernie going to get through this? What is it? He speaks for maybe 15 minutes in one of these debates.
Yeah.
That's
but
20
you're standing
minutes.
up there for a few hours.
Yeah, he stood up there and he had that old bark, and he had a couple counter punches. The medical marijuana joke was pretty funny. So I don't know. Were you relieved by his performance?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's great. And I had that very nice moment of grace, I think, where he was thanking his fellow candidates for sending him their love and support throughout the time he was in the hospital. I thought clearly he's just as fit as ever to run. I mean, it's fair to have health concerns. I think that's you could talk about people's age. There's nothing wrong with that. But then look at the whole field. And
man, it was funny. The lady, the question, I don't know the woman's name, but she was like, she knew she had to ask Bernie the question because he had the heart attack. Yeah. But then she flipped it. And then she just started asking all the old people up there, hey, Biden, what about you? And then Elizabeth Warren. And then out of nowhere, she turns to Tulsi Gabbard. Yeah. Like, Tulsi Gabbard is the fittest presidential candidate I've ever seen in the history. She's, I don't know if you know this, but she's a big surfer. She's in incredible shape. So they just, what about you? What the heck? They're kind of like disguising the Bernie question. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. I mean, it was on the tip of people's tongue, so I guess that they had to do it. But the way Bernie responded to that, he said, "I'm fine, but let me, talk about what Cory Booker had to say." I think that was a good way to approach this. Is say, it's okay, we can talk about that, but let's move on. We're running for president. There's plenty of very important issues to discuss.
All right. I got Jeff Johnson sitting on deck here. I'm going to bring him on. But before I do, I cannot let you escape the studio. Getting your thoughts on my beloved Chicago Bulls. Their season begins Wednesday, so you won't be back until the season has already begun. The season opens, I believe, in Charlotte with the game against the Hornets.
That's right.
And so are you optimistic as we head into the Chicago Bulls season?
I was on here right before the Bears season started, and I made a very poor prediction about beating the Green Bay Packers. So I'm a little I was slightly reticent to go too wild, but look, this is the first time in a long time that the Chicago Bulls have got me excited for a season because of their the team that they've put together. And Jim Boylan, I gotta say, there was a point last year where I was just saying, he's making these guys do suicide runs in the gym. Like, this is not gonna work out. The way this training camp and preseason has gone, looks like he has the faith of the team. He's got some vets now with Thad Young and Otto Porter that clearly have bought into his system. So if they can do this thing where they're only holding the ball for like half a second and having it fly around the whole court, then they could have a really fast offense. Kobe White's looking great. I'm hyped.
You're hyped. So how many wins do you predict for the Bulls?
What do we have, 22 last year?
22 wins last year.
I think maybe 45.
Whoa, 45 for Miles.
With the eighth or ninth seed. So we might make the playoffs, or we'll be just out of there.
All right, very good. Well, I predicted an undefeated Bears season. I said they would be Super Bowl champs. So my prognostication abilities are out the window. Anyway, thank you very much, Miles Kampf-Lassin, in these times. And just tell folks where they get a hold of you if they want to get a hold of you.
Yeah, of course. If you want to reach me, it's Miles at inthesetimes.com. You send me an email, but also check out my work at In These Times. We're publishing tons of reporting on the teacher strike. We have a news story up I published right before I came over here by Carrie Liderson, straight from the picket line. Great piece. Me and Micah are actually working on a story for another outlet. You look out for that. But inthesetimes.com, check it out, and follow me on Twitter at Miles K. Lassin. So thanks, y'all.
Now, if they want to get a hold of you, let's give them that phone number, buddy.
We'll save that for...
Oh, you can get a hold of people by Twitter. Did you know that, D? I'm very Twitter updated. All right, Miles, thank you very much. Jeff Johnson on deck. We're going to bring him on when we return. At Chicagoland Cremation Options, we are committed to listening, educating, and guiding your family through the cremation process. Whether it is time of death or when planning your wishes for the future, Chicagoland Cremation Options can accommodate you at an affordable price and with great dignity. Avoid funeral home costs with direct access to a crematory for a cremation. Chicagoland Cremation Options, just south of O'Hare, 5 minutes west of Chicago. It's a family-owned business and operated by my good friend, Douglas Klein. Visit it at ChicagolandCremationOptions.com. One more time, ChicagolandCremationOptions.com.
By the way, he gave me permission to touch him. All right?
Today's Ben Joravsky Show was brought to you in part by Chicago Architecture Center. Discover the breadth and majesty of Chicago's architecture on a Chicago Architecture Center bus tour. From bungalows to Bauhaus, our expert docents will share the fascinating stories behind our city's architecture. Book your tour at architecture.org/tours. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm actually on a bus tour right now. Oh my, look at that wonderful piece of architecture.
The union will say they need a nurse in every school. I agree. And we put it in writing in the contract in a way that ensures that it happens. The union will say that they want more support for students experiencing homelessness. We did that. We offered to put those additional supports in the contract. And here at City Hall, our Department of Housing and our Department of Children and Families and Support Services, we are making historic advances when it comes to affordable housing and dealing with homelessness. The union says it wants smaller class sizes memorialized in the contract. We agreed and offered more funds to reduce class sizes in high poverty schools, along with an enforcement mechanism that will make it happen. So why don't we have a deal? The union has told the public repeatedly that the two issues we need to resolve are class size and staffing, and we have met their needs. But behind the scenes, they've continued to bring up additional bargaining issues that they say must be resolved before they can have a contract. For example, the union is still demanding to shorten instructional time by 30 minutes in the morning. We won't do that. We will not cheat our children out of instructional time. And I won't agree to any changes that do that. The union wants more money for teachers and staff on top of the generous offer that we have already put on the table. CTU isn't satisfied with the average teacher getting a 24% increase and every teacher getting at least a 16% increase over the life of the contract. On Friday, they proposed an additional $230 million in teacher pay over the life of the contract.
All right, everybody, hour number 2 of your Ben Joravsky Show for Thursday, October 17th is moments away. But before we get into that, we need to thank the following unions again for sponsoring this program. First up, it's the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local 126 and District 8, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150, and of course, today's program is brought to you by our good friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. Hour number 2, let's go. It is Thursday, October 17th, and live from the Chicago Sun-Times Chicago Reader Studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. In this hour of the program, Union man Jeff Johnson is with us, and we welcome back Cook County Commissioner and CTU member Brandon Johnson. And now your host, Chicago Reader columnist, Ben Joravsky.
Jeff Johnson in the studio wearing his Broncos colored shirt. I don't know how a guy from Chicago graduated from Lane Tech and become a Denver Broncos fan, but
just going all in right now.
Yeah,
like
somehow or other
he is. Just start out all in.
Yeah.
That's how it's going to be today.
We missed you. Right?
That's how it's going to be. It's go time.
I remain a loyal Bears fan, even though they've made some of the dumbest decisions in the history of pro football. But whatever. I still bleed Chicago Bear, whatever it is. Blue. Anyway, do you have an update for me?
Absolutely, I do. Shout out to the Chicago Sun-Times. They are giving us live updates here as the teacher strike is taking place. So we're going to read the updates here. This is about 1:41 p.m., not long ago here. It says here, the president of the Chicago Teachers Union says, well, it's Jesse Sharkey. He says, quote, "It's very unlikely a deal will be reached today." While Jesse Sharkey said talks have been positive at a bargaining session between the city and union and Malcolm X College on the near west side, it was unlikely a deal would be reached tonight. That means school would likely not be in session Friday, but no official decision has been announced on whether classes will be canceled.
All right, very good. I like the positive part about it. You know, I'm not one of these guys who likes to strike, Jeff Johnson. I'm a more get along with everybody kind of guy. So
of course you are. Yeah, get along with everybody. Yeah.
So I always get a little uncomfortable when there's a strike. But what's your advice as a longtime union guy when you see teachers walking the picket line?
Just to backtrack, I was walking my dogs today, and I saw a lady coming down the street in a red T-shirt, and she was holding some signs. Younger lady, and I'm like, you know what? I go, good luck. And the look on her face, it was Madison and Troop, and the look on her face was, kind of like, wait, what? I'm like, no, just good luck. And I go, I was recording secretary at IBW Local 9, and I'm fire department dispatcher right at the OEMC right there. And so we talked for a while. And so, advice on that is, and me and you have talked about it before, nobody wants to strike. That's your last ditch effort. If you've hit that wall and they're not budging, right? Your employer has this, this is it. No. It's the last tool in your toolbox that you want to do, public education and, stuff like that. And so advice, it's interesting because, once you draw that line in the sand and then you do strike, that's like I said, last tool in the toolbox, because you draw that line in the sand and it's a matter of when do you come back to work? When does the employer cave? When do you cave? Who ends up winning a strike? You can always cut a deal and both sides can win publicly. Technically, right? Everybody comes out with their piece of paper. I always tell you, there's that political game. Yeah, that we got. But in a strike, it's like, line in the sand. Who wins? Who doesn't? And that always worries me.
Why so? Why do you say that?
Just because you have an employer that per se might not cave, or you have an employee union that doesn't want to cave, and you saw GM. 29 days, 30 days.
Finally, agreement, right?
Yeah, they reached an agreement. And on a side note, there was an actuary that wrote a story for Forbes. And the story starts out, it was on Twitter, and the story starts out with there's a proxy member who's a New York City trustee on one of the New York City pension funds that wants to use the New York City pension fund money to lean on GM to cave for employees. Are you okay with that? Goddamn right, I'm okay with that, right? Fair wages, good contracts, more local jobs, etc. And so you go down this road of a strike, and you have, like, for that, it's a little different with a private company, but you have proxies leaning on the employer to strike. In a public teacher fund, or a public teacher strike, it's the general public that is the, per se, proxy. Yeah, you got to do a great job. And I know CTU has been out there really trying to talk about what they're about. City's done a job to try and talk about what we're offering them. And it is an interesting environment when you have to win over the public for a strike. And I always say government workers aren't necessarily the best viewed in the public's eyes. And that's what always worries me, is you go into this already kind of below. And teachers have done a great job, right? Teachers have always kind of separated themselves a little bit, right? You got the police and fire, which I always joke about the heroes, right? Hey, what are the heroes doing today? Just joking around. And then you got the teachers kind of by themselves, and then you got your government employees. And so it's an interesting dynamic with the teacher strike. And you're seeing more nursing strikes happen. Teacher strikes have risen across since the original Karen Lewis, and I say Karen Lewis because that's what it's basically kind of defined as, the Karen Lewis versus Rahm strike, and then the teachers strike. You've seen them more nationally, and there's been some good population, or some good, I said population, but there's some good backing to them across the nation, even in states that aren't necessarily union friendly. And, there's a story there where, you have these teachers in poverty, which are teaching your kids, right? And, so it's a matter of all trying to tie that in together, and, good luck.
Well, you mentioned the 2012 strike where Karen Lewis was leading the teachers union. I think it caught Rahm off guard, the amount of support the public gave the teachers then.
Yeah.
What's your sense about the public support? You're around a lot of fire department employees. Back in 2012, I always point this out, Nick Sposato, a firefighter, and the alderman. Back then, he was the alderman of the
36.
38.
And now Chris Terrafano.
So he stood with the teachers.
Yeah.
What's your sense of where the public and the fire department firefighters are now?
Well, we'll say city employees total, or
city employees.
We'll just go that route. I think they support their union brothers and sisters right off the bat, right? Because that's your go-to. And the public aspect, I don't know. I that's the one part. The public, I can't put my finger on. CTUs try to do a good job of getting their word out there about, hey, what we're about. And you always see the, per se, anti-union crowd going, oh, yeah, whatever. You got your pay raises. What else do you want? And they just kick them in the shins on that, right? And, class sizes, a teacher, a counselor, a nurse, support services. And that gets lost in the shuffle sometimes in that argument. And, just from a PR standpoint, I think that's what would worry me, because people focus so much on the pay raise, Well, your health care is also going up, basically 1.52% over 2 or 3 years is what they're kind of advertising. And so your pay raise are going to get lost, but when they throw up the pay raise for the total agreement. I think overall city employees will back them, but the city employees, I've always told you, are kind of we're a finicky bunch as far as how we feel at the time.
Yeah, a finicky bunch. All right, let's move away from the two. We talked a lot about the teachers. I've been waiting to get to conversation with you about our favorite topic, pensions. Jeff Johnson and I are probably the only two people in the city of Chicago who love talking pensions.
Exactly.
Although there's a few geeks out there who appreciate it.
Yeah.
Governor Pritzker came out with a proposal for a pension consolidation. Jeff, explain how this impacts taxpayers, pensioners, and Chicago. Break it down a little bit for us.
All right. So the most important part is the taxpayer. How does it affect taxpayers, right? So I think that's the most important part, but we'll get to that in a minute because that's the funniest part of this. How it affects the city? Right now, nothing because, we have our own pension funds. We're larger scale. We're larger scope. So for consolidation, it wouldn't help us at all, wouldn't even, have any impact on us. For the members, it's a lot of, if you are Jesus Christ, where are you from?
Alton,
Illinois. I will get this. Alton,
618.
Illinois. Okay. If you're a fireman in Alton, Illinois, you have your own pension fund, right? Your own benefits, this is your pension fund. It's your retirement, your safety, your security in elder age, your golden years. And so now you have a pension fund that might have, a trustee or trustees, and now they're going to take that pension fund and put it in with Peru, or they're going to put it in with East Peoria. You're going to get lumped together, and you're going to be in a Illinois firefighters pension fund, for example. And you're going to have, what the plan is to have a police pension fund and a firefighters pension fund, two pension funds. One's going to be roughly $11 billion. The other one's going to be $8 billion. And so you go from working in Alton and having pride in your city of Alton, which I know Dee does, and then all of a sudden you're kind of in this conglomerate pension fund. Now, how does it affect taxpayers? This is the best part of this. And I'm big on, I've told you before, politicians tend to like to do something and then hold up, we did something, right? Hear the paper flapping. It doesn't change the funding 1 cent, right? If Alton is 35% funded, they get merged in with everything else, they are 35% funded. They're going to keep individual accounts for all these 670 different kind of agencies. And the burden, whatever you want to call it, right? The fear-catching words, chaos, burden, the liability is still on these cities individually. And it doesn't change anything. Like last time I was here, I think I told you, it was like putting perfume on a pig.
Yeah.
And you still need to find funding ideas for these pension funds. And that's where, I mean, you can hold up a piece of paper and say I did something, but...
So what's the advantage?
The advantage is what they're saying is for like investment fees, stuff like this, that you can save some money. Where if it's a larger pool of funds, that you can save money. They've done studies that anywhere from 11 to 22 years is what it will take to save the original upfront fees of putting this together. 11 to 22 years, low end, high end, as far as what it will save. And that's where things kind of, you start to go this way, right? It can be a good PR stunt. I say stunt, but it can be a good PR issue to, hey, we did something on Illinois pensions, because the taxpayers see that and go, okay, hey, they did something. Wow, okay, they fixed it. And then when the fair tax comes, when marijuana, when all these things come online, hey, we got to put these sorts of pensions. I just fear the public going like, wait a minute, didn't you just fix them?
Yeah, I know, my goodness. That works against it. That's like the old lottery.
Yeah.
There's so many people my age, and well, even 50 and above. I thought the lottery was going to solve this.
Yeah, what do you mean? Yeah, I still hear that now.
Yeah, I thought the lottery. We're going to hear that when marijuana sales kick in. We're going to hear that. I've gotten a few phone calls. I'm going to bring some of you guys on. I know you're listening from some police pension people.
Yeah,
they want to come on the show and talk about it. They're apprehensive and skeptical about it. And
well, you give up local control. I mean, that's where, it's your pension fund. You're giving up local control to somebody if you're in Alton, and you're going to give up control to somebody from Tinley, or, it's your pension fund. It's your livelihood. You kind of want to have a say in it, right? You invest your money or you give money every day from the day you start as an employee into your pension fund. And, you're giving it up, your control to somebody else. That would worry me. I mean, ultimately in 30 years, we all might go like, oh, that was a great decision. Hey, it worked out perfectly. But there's a lot of questions. And it just seems to be like, well, nope, I want this. We're doing it.
And that sort of puts people on the defensive a little bit.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
But again, this is just so everybody knows, this is combining, pooling pensions outside of the city of Chicago.
Yeah, basically everything south of I-80, right?
Okay.
So, 670 funds south of I-80, Article 3, Article 4, police and fire funds that have over 5,000 residents, less than 500,000 residents. So it's that, basically, most other cities.
Well, as listeners to this show know, because Jeff pointed this out about 3 months ago when we were discussing pensions, our police and fire pensions are going to be fortified, supposedly, by a casino.
Yes.
In
SB 777.
Yes. Well, a bill that passed long before Mayor Lightfoot was mayor, long before Governor Pritzker was governor.
Yeah.
This goes back, I think Quinn was the governor. Am I right about that?
Yeah.
Quinn was, anyway, so, all right. In the meantime, it took a while. It looked as though Chicago was going to get a casino. And now I'm not quite certain what the situation is, Jeff Johnson. Since the last time you were on the show, Lori Lightfoot has trotted out this notion that a casino in Chicago would be owned by the city. I don't know.
I see. I like that. I like it.
Talk about that.
Well, no, it's the reason that it got killed or never moved under Daley, because downstate want to give a casino to Chicago, right? Chicago, for your out-of-state listeners that you might have, we have a reputation that some might say isn't necessarily the best.
Yeah.
What do you want to call it, right? And
bad reputation.
A bad reputation, right? And so downstate wouldn't want to give us a casino and let us run it. And that's part of the reason it kind of never moved. And then you have the other casinos outlying of Chicago that are worried about losing their money. And so now the big dog in the state now is Rivers in Des Plaines, formerly of Rosemont, but now ended up in Des Plaines. And so the deal that came out originally was that, they were going to have it was going to be all profit split a third, city, private owner, and state. And then there was a study that came out and said that a private owner wouldn't take on a casino if they couldn't make enough money. And then under this current deal, they're not going to make enough money. And then it came back out that how about we own the casino and we split it Chicago and the state and hire a manager. I think, honestly, just from a revenue standpoint, that's a great idea. I think you're catching some people off guard because you have to kind of back people into this conversation as far as, if you're a state rep from Alton, you got to kind of back them into this conversation as far as all right, well, why it makes sense, you know? And I always say that, there's a way there where if the state's getting increased contributions from a pension fund or from a casino, it's still helping the state out, even if you're seeing Rivers or Elgin or some of their casinos take a little bit less in. But if the state's kicking the money in through the city casino, it all kind of equals out there, right? Overall, it's a net win. And then you have all these racinos that are talking about coming on board. I say all of them, but a few of them. Tinley Park was one that's been in the news lately. You have all these slot machines that you can put around the state that are making more money too. And which, to be extremely honest, I've always found kind of weird, right? When I drive down to Springfield a lot, there's a stop I always stop and get gas in El Paso, Illinois, because I just first time I was driving out of Springfield, I found it weird.
I didn't even know there was an El Paso.
El Paso, Illinois.
Did you know that?
No.
Oh,
yeah. And it was just, so there's a gas station. There's a gas station at McDonald's. All right, whatever. So you go in, and they have a boarded off room with plywood, and they didn't even bother to paint the plywood in this gas station. And there are 7 slot machines in there. And I've just found that every time I stop, I get my gas. I think it's exit 187 going down to I-55 El Paso, and I've never seen a single person in there. And these slot machines that they're throwing up all over the state, that amazes me, from the get-go. And I think
people just, you don't have the gambling bug, I don't think. I've had the gambling bug. It is a strong, powerful motivation, Jeff. You just want to chase that money.
But I heard that you used to bet the ponies.
Yes, I did.
The gentleman that signed me in at the Sun-Times said that he taught you how to bet the ponies like 40 years ago.
Is that right? Is Albert here today?
Yeah. No, a couple of weeks ago. Last month. Albert.
Yeah. Albert taught me that a long time.
I taught him how to bet the ponies. I go, what?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. So I had that. I know what it's when you're chasing a horse. And I think, now we're on a tangent. I think horse racing is more legit than like the slots, riverboat gambling, etc. So because the total house is against you. The whole thing is set up to make you lose. So maybe I'm just biased because it's my particular.
Wish you would have told me that earlier. I ordered slot machines for the studio. We're gonna VLM it, baby.
That's how we're gonna finance the show.
Yeah, exactly.
Jeff Johnson. The live stream is going back and forth. They're wondering. Steven, Kyle, they're all wondering where you. They're hearing your accent. Where are you from?
Where am I from? Oh, they're gonna piss me off now.
They're wondering if you're from the suburbs, if you're from the city, if you're from what part. Where are you? What part of They're hearing the accent. They're wondering where you're from.
Can I say where he's from? The pride and joy of Lane Tech High School.
Yeah, City of Chicago, born and raised, Elston and Belmont.
There you go. Yeah. There you go, live stream.
I'm talking kind of soft, but yeah, Jesus Christ.
Oh, they like you. They like
City
you.
City of Chicago.
He's a Chicago guy.
I'm going to speak up a little louder. Born and raised, City of Chicago, Walt Disney Magnet for elementary school, Lane Tech for high school. Got my associates at the City of Chicago Fire Academy for fire science. Got hired at the city when I was 20, and City of Chicago.
20 years old. Good God. And
I'm one of the last. I say I'm one of the last, right? But no, the climate now, and we need police. But you say, right, pay is good. Okay, here's $50,000, right? $25 an hour to start out to be a Chicago police officer.
Is that what the starting?
Yeah, I think it's $47,000.
Okay.
Here's
less than a teacher would get. I think teachers are 51. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah, don't quote me either.
Right, okay.
Right? But the argument's always like 2-year degree versus 4-year degree. I pay for it in schooling, etc. But yeah, here's $47,000. You'd be working midnights in a not safe part of the city, right? And it's the, does that make it easier or anything like this? There's pros to it. But there's some people that really want to do the job.
There you go. Now you're hitting it on the head, Jeff Johnson. The guys that want to be cops.
That want to do it, right? And I'd like to think, and this, but this is a whole nother tangent you go down with, like, the good versus bad, right? I think that overwhelmingly high majority, and I know a lot of police officers. I know some of the police trustees that are on the police pension fund, and they got into it for the right reasons, right? And they could make $20 an hour or $20,000 a year, and they'd still do their job because it's something they like. Yeah. And then you get some knuckleheads, but you have knuckleheads in any profession.
Absolutely.
If you work at Chipotle, there's knuckleheads that work there.
Yeah, the difference is that the knuckleheads in the police department have a gun. That's a little scary. The knuckleheads at Chipotle may not have guns, but I understand.
They could screw up my burrito, though.
I understand why so many kids who grew up in Chicago want to be police officers or firefighters. I know a lot of kids I coach are firefighter. They want to be firefighters. They want the action, the challenge, you're in shape. And then when you get the job, they like the benefits. I'm talking about a firefighter job, the time off stuff. Yeah. So I understand the attraction to it.
But no, this goes, and I think me and you've had conversations about it. I wear a Chicago flag lapel pin everywhere I go, every conference I go to, everywhere I'm at. And I had a conversation with somebody from Seattle actually last night, and he didn't know what the flag was. He goes, "Oh, what's that?" And I was a little like, "What do you mean? What's what?" And he goes, "The flag." And I go, "Are you kidding me?" And I was a little kind of like offended almost. I'm like, "Are you kidding me? What do you mean?" And it's a pride thing. I'm extremely proud of Chicago. And I'm waiting for that one jerk to ask why, right? Why are you proud of Chicago? And I'm punching him in the mouth. But no, it's a pride thing. And so people that get city jobs, it's a pride thing in your city. You take care of your city. So today they were doing street sweeping down my block. And I was out there with a hose, like a 90-year-old woman, spraying down the sidewalk, you know, just getting the leaves off, the cigarette butts, everything. And the street sweeper came by. And the street sweepers are actually in my pension fund. And so flag them down. You know, I see him coming down the block. It just happened to be out there. I was spraying off everything, and, you know, and he stops. I'm like, hey, I just wanted you to know I'm trying to make everything. He goes, I appreciate that. And oh, he's same, Jeff Johnson, you know, and then I introduced myself. Oh, okay, all right, whatever. He went down the block 4 times because there's some construction going on across the street. And I'm like, dude, he just had to, I was just stopping you to say hi or whatever. And he goes, no, he goes, I take pride in my work. He goes, I go down these streets. I want to make sure that they're clean. I was like, all right. Now that's the city worker you want. That's somebody that's proud in the city. And it's things like that, you know, like, you know, when people go into these jobs, it's not because of the pay. It's not because of the benefits. It's not, you know, that's just a byproduct for a lot of people as far as having a good job and doing something you like for a employer that you respect and, you know, to be respected as an employee. But yet again, I mean, every time I walk in here to do the show, I always walk around the floor, just talk to Sam Charles, talk to, you know, stop the guys. Hey, what's going on? And there's a steady line of employees coming in there because they like doing the same thing. They have pride in their work. Yeah. You know, the Sun-Times reporters are some of the best. I love my Tribune reporters. Even though Hal Dardick hit us with a piece 2 weeks ago.
Which one was that? I can't.
Rahm raised taxes $1.6 billion, but pension unfunded liability went up $7 billion.
Oh, I saw that one.
Yeah.
Was that not accurate?
It's a little, how should I say? And it's, I mean, you know, I love Hal. Hal, if you listen to this, I do love you. Little misleading. You know, the financials of, like, we didn't hit our marks last year, but other pension funds are. City of Chicago and pension funds are on a calendar year, January 1st to December 31st. Basically, every other city in the country is on a fiscal year, June to June. So New York City got 6.4% for 2018 fiscal year. For 2018, we were minus 4%. So I've had people ask me, like, well, how did New York get 6%? Why'd you only get minus 4%? What'd you do differently? If we were on a fiscal year, June, because fourth quarter screwed everybody up. If we were on June to June, we would have been right in there.
Yeah.
And then the other aspect of, well, you altered your mortality tables. Well, yes, people are living longer now, so they're going to get more pension. But most actuaries will actually acknowledge that maybe we've gone a little too far with people, you know, like living like a little longer. Like, we don't think it's actually that long. And then when we re-advised it, or when we reevaluate it, it's going to drop down. The unfunded liability go down. And the whole thing about it is liability. It's a liability, right? You don't know. That's if the city went out of business tomorrow. The city's never going to go out of business tomorrow, right?
Let's hope.
Well, yeah. Well, governments go on, right? Governments go on. And so out of the $16 billion unfunded liability that the number keeps always getting thrown out there, $5 billion of it is of active employees. When they hire you on day one, they calculate kind of what your pension would be if you work, 27 years and et cetera, et cetera. And that $3 million, for example, if you don't have that in a savings account, now it's an unfunded liability the day they hire you. And that's unfair. You know, it's something that, you know, but it's Gatsby. Gatsby got very conservative under some conservative leadership presidents, and that's what that's the song that we dance to.
All right, and you know, maybe we'll. There's I told you this before we went on the air. There's someone from the police pension who wants to come on the show with you. Everybody wants to come on the show with Jeff Johnson. Maybe we get Hal Dardick to come on the show with you. We'll have a nice little interesting.
Me and him start slugging it out in the corner over there. Oh yeah.
He actually had some nice things to say about the show, so maybe I should reach out to him and bring him on the show. Hal Dardick, Jeff Johnson was, I guess. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back after this.
Read the Chicago Reader to get up to speed on what's what in Chicago. Culture, food, arts and entertainment, weekly concert listings, weekly event listings, the environment, travel. I can continue, but you get the point. And for all of you Chicago political junkies, raw weekly columns on real city politics from Maya Dukmasova and our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader, free to the public in newsstands throughout the city and online at chicagoreader.com. Read it now and be a more informed Chicagoan.
The same goals that we have in the contract currently is what they put in writing. That's insufficient. Number two, the same class size committee that's currently in the contract is what she put in writing. That's insufficient. And they have not committed a dollar amount to lowering class sizes. There are 1,300 oversized classrooms in the city of Chicago right now. If you go on the south side to Chatham, there are almost 40 students in a kindergarten classroom. If you go to the 10th Ward on the southeast side of town, you can go in a classroom with 36 kids in a kindergarten classroom. And you know what's even more offensive this morning is that they have nurses coming into our schools on tomorrow to be with students, but she cannot put a nursing ratio in a contract. This is not a joke, people. This team, our team of 40, we have been asking, begging, organizing, demanding the same things for the last 10 years. And she should know because her team, her campaign team, copy and pasted every single demand that we've put forth for the last 10 years into a campaign platform. She has given speech after speech about resourcing neighborhood schools, providing nurses and librarians, and yet we're standing here talking about a mayor who knew it was her job when she ran to be mayor, knew it was her job to transform the Chicago public schools. So she can put a nurse in a classroom in the school building when it's empty, but can't put one in there when it's full of students. Next question.
Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
Cook County Board Commissioner Brandon Johnson has joined us. Cook County Commissioner Brandon Johnson has joined us. He's also a proud member of the Chicago Teachers Union. When I met him, he was an organizer for the Chicago Teachers Union. So we'll be talking Chicago Teachers Union, strikes, what the future is for public education in the city of Chicago, et cetera, and so forth with Brandon Johnson. He also wants to talk about baseball. I think he always wants to talk about. So before I let the other Johnson go, Jeff Johnson, any last thoughts before I let you go and bring on Brandon?
No, just good luck to CTU, and I hope that works out in their favor as far as the strike. Like I said, you always want to go. That's last resort, and you draw that line in the sand. It's just a matter of hopefully they come to the table. And I personally, I think it's a short strike. I think that this is kind of settled up pretty quickly. Just because there's so much to lose, more so from the employer aspect of things. So, and I just wish them good luck and, hang in there,
All right. Very good, Jeff Johnson. The next time you come in, we have plenty of budget conversation to talk about. We didn't even get to that.
Yeah, we didn't even get to that.
We didn't even get to that today.
Hopefully those slot machines will be coming in soon.
And those slot machines
be sitting there, be playing them in a corner while the show's going on. Yeah.
All right. Very good, Jeff Johnson. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Hey, man. Thanks, Ben, for having me. Jeff Johnson, it has to be the best dressed guest today.
No, he is.
By far.
Yeah. You should see the jacket.
I saw it.
Oh, you saw it? Yeah.
I peeped it when I walked in. I'm like, okay, this is what we're doing today.
Yeah, no, he ups the game. And he's got his, I don't know if you know this, Denver Broncos colors.
I was wondering what the color was about, so that actually explains a few things.
I don't know how a guy from Lane Tech is a Denver Bronco fan.
Misguided youth.
Yeah, misguided youth.
Thanks, Jeff.
I bleed Bears blue or whatever it is, and Bulls red. All right, Brandon Johnson, let's get an update. While we're in here, have they settled the strike?
No, we have not reached an agreement yet. We're obviously still in the process of negotiating. There is some movement. Unfortunately, it takes a job action for the employer to take our demand seriously. So there's been some movement. So I can report that the Chicago Public Schools has finally released something in writing for us to respond to around class size. Now, I'm not saying that what they have presented is all favorable, but it is certainly a step in the right direction. So our movement today obviously is a direct result of the job action, not just by the Chicago Teachers Union, of course, SEIU Local 73. So you got red and purple holding it strong in the city of Chicago.
Yeah, let's talk about that. The Park District settled their contract negotiations with the the mayor yesterday, I want to say. I'm losing track of time, Brandon. The cynic in me, which is always out there, I was a little surprised by that. I thought there would be solidarity across the board throughout the strike just to put more pressure on Lori Lightfoot. So am I wrong to be cynical and think that this was done just to make sure that the kids would have somewhere to go to, and so there'd be less pressure on Lori Lightfoot?
Yeah, I can't speak to anyone's political motives. All I can say is that the whole purpose of this moment is to secure economic, racial, and social justice for the city of Chicago. So, something that strikes me, in this moment, and Ben, we've had, these conversations about, our current situation, the mayor of Chicago, and I don't think it's a surprise to her. At least it shouldn't be that she inherited a corrupt system. She should have known that. In the history of Chicago, when it comes to public schools, and this goes way back when, right? One of my, heroes, Al Raby, who taught at Marshall High School, that helped provoke a walkout in Chicago public schools, led to a massive boycott with parents and teachers collaborating together to resist segregation and to resist, a system that wasn't paying attention and properly resourcing schools, and particularly black schools in Chicago. And so we fast forward and we know the history, of course, when Mayor Daley took control of the public schools, worked with Republicans the one time that they were in charge, or that brief moment where they controlled every aspect of our government. The Mayor Daley worked with Republicans to essentially create a scenario that we're living in right now. What's interesting, though, is that one of the senators, of course, that voted against that effort is now the board president, DeValle, who predicted that by giving the control of Chicago public schools over to the hands of the mayor would lead to this type of disaster. And so she knew that going in. So that's why it was important for her, obviously, to run on a platform that, quite frankly, we have been pushing in earnest the last 10 years. A social worker, a counselor, librarian, class sizes that are manageable, every single school, fighting for equity. That was her platform. She literally took our entire agenda, the Chicago Teachers Union, and made it a part of her education platform. And so she made those promises. People voted for her because they were confident that she would right wrongs of the past. And so now that she is in this governance status, of course, it has been disappointing, to say the least, that she has not been willing to commit herself to putting the promises that she made on the campaign trail in writing, to do something that no other mayor has been able to do. What an incredible position to be in, especially when you run on a platform calling for transformation. And I certainly know what that's like, because that's what I did. And the constituents that voted for me a few months ago, they expect me to deliver on those commitments that I made. That's what leadership is. And that's a reasonable expectation. The last thing that I'll say is, though, is that today at the negotiating table, you had educators talking. So the only conclusion that I can come to is that when politicians get out of the way, when lawyers get out of the way, educators can talk about their real experiences.
Wait, who is at the bargaining table?
So obviously our folks, our 40-member bargaining team, which is made up of our rank and file members. We also have folks in leadership, like our president, Jesse Sharkey, our vice president, Stacey Davis Gates. Both, of course, were social studies teachers when they were in the classroom. Our bargaining unit is made up of rank and file members, paraprofessionals, nurses, the few that we have. And then on the city side, you had their educators, their education team. So Dr. LaTanya McDade, I'm not sure if she's a doctor. I just gave her a promotion, perhaps, or more student debt. I don't know, but McDade. And so you had individuals who have been in the classroom, and those experiences were shared today. And so that's why we finally received at least something in writing regarding how do we address class size.
So the lawyers weren't there?
The lawyers and the politicians had a chance to take a breather.
So your guy is Block, and their guy is, oh boy, Franchik. So those two guys were playing cards in the back room or something like that?
I'm not able to disclose how they handle their free time when educators are actually doing their jobs to secure justice for children.
Yeah.
But it does really emphasize why it's important that we have an elected representative school board. Stacy's a parent, Jesse's a parent. My kids got up this morning. I'm a parent. They were in their red T-shirts. You actually experience movement today when not just educators, but parents were at the table, providing real anecdotal evidence of what it means to have a school system that is just and equitable. That shouldn't be a a privilege for a handful of folks. We need to open up the table, and the best way to ensure that parents are at the table, to have an elected representative school board, where someone's political future, who wants to be mayor of Chicago, doesn't rest, or it doesn't become limited in a negotiation over something so important, which are our schools. And so Mayor Lightfoot taking a step back, other folks taking a step back, and allowing parents and teachers to actually have real discourse around what it means to have a class size that's manageable. We finally got some movement on it.
All right, now before we get into take a little deeper dive on what the movement is and what it means, let's talk about a theme that's out there, and it's been put out there for quite a while. I've been reading it in the Tribune. I've been reading it in other papers. I'm not sure the Sun-Times has been hammering this one, but I've been hearing it from Lori Lightfoot's supporters, and it goes like this. The Chicago Teachers Union was never serious about coming to accord with Mayor Lori Lightfoot. They wanted to prove to Mayor Lori Lightfoot that they were a presence that she had to respect. And this is a direct result of the trouncing that Tony Perkwinkle took in the mayor's race of April, in which he ran 101 against Lori Lightfoot. What's your response? I know you know that theme's out there. I'm sure you've probably heard it yourself. So what's your response to that?
Yeah. You know, look, Ben, when you have a person who runs on a platform that reflects our values, who agrees with everything that we have put forward, it shouldn't take a strike for the administration to finally put in writing at least a counter proposal to what we've been talking about. This notion that somehow individuals have decided to forego a paycheck over an endorsement, that response, or at least that the frame that is out there, has to be one of the most puerile presentations that I've heard in a long time. It's just immature. It's irresponsible to suggest that somehow that there is some sort of grudge match, in the midst of this challenge. This challenge that, again, we've all known that it's been there, and for the mayor of Chicago to be in a very unique position to do something that no other mayor has been willing to do. You would think that her advisors, or just herself, would sprint to the front to be the mayor to finally deliver equity for the city of Chicago, one of the most segregated cities in our entire country, but also been one of the wealthiest places in all of the world, right here in Chicago. To set us up for a new direction, a new course for how we administer justice, not just for our education system, but as you know, Ben, this is also about our communities and our neighborhoods. When we're experiencing the type of violence that we've experienced in this city, why not demand a social worker? That's reasonable. I mean, everybody knows that's reasonable. And so what the Tribune, of course, has to do, or other people who frame it that way, they have to make this about some sort of grudge match. What I will say, though, it is very political. These are political problems. When you can settle a contract for developers for a playground in one of the wealthiest communities in the entire country, I'm sure there's going to be some pretty nice things there. But you can settle a contract for a couple $2 billion for the wealthiest folks to have somewhere to go and play. But you have schools in Chicago that do not have a nurse, a social worker, and a class size cap that allows for education to actually be executed in the best possible way. There's something wrong with that political system. And why not teachers? Why not paraprofessionals? I mean, isn't that the movement? The working class movement that's pushing the political system to be more responsible to the individuals who actually make up our communities? That's a reasonable expectation. So I know that narrative is out there. It's one that allows for the type of, apparatus to have some contentious debate around something that is just ridiculous. I mean, what was the turnout for voting in the last election.
34%. I want to, don't quote me. It's either 33, 34, or 35.
Right.
One or the other.
That's right.
Yeah.
Low 30s. You know, so you had 70% of the city of Chicago didn't weigh in on this election. No one should go into elected leadership believing that you have a mandate and not deliver on that mandate. Like if you truly believe that you have a mandate, even though 70% of the city that did not vote, then behave like it, act like it, do it, put it in writing. And the reason why I'm hopeful, Ben, is because I'm looking at a city right now that has poured in so much support for this moment. People all over the country. You have 5 presidential candidates who are tweeting saying yes to a social worker. You have presidential candidates saying yes to a nurse every single day in the school. Nothing too radical, like not even by Bernie Sanders standards, right? Nothing too radical. But the fact that there is overwhelming support for the ideas that we have been pushing for the last 10 years, support, by the way, that we received from the mayor of Chicago, who ran on it. Let's get it done.
All right, let's get it done indeed. Brandon Johnson's my guest, Chicago Teachers Union, Cook County Board Commissioner. I will take a break, come back with more talk about the teachers, the mayor, and politics in general. I'll be right back with Brandon.
Read the Chicago Reader to get up to speed on what's what in Chicago. Culture, food, arts and entertainment, weekly concert listings, weekly event listings, the environment, travel. I can continue, but you get the point. And for all of you Chicago political junkies, raw weekly columns on real city politics from Maya Dukmasova and our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader, free to the public in newsstands throughout the city and online at chicagoreader.com. Read it now and be a more informed Chicagoan.
Hey, Chicago Sun-Times podcast listeners. You looking for another podcast to love like this one? Because I know you love this one. We have just the story for you. TJ Jimenez was a 13-year-old kid in Chicago. When he was arrested for a murder he swore he didn't commit, he went to prison, still a child, still defending his innocence. 17 years later, he was acquitted, released, and given $25 million. What happens next is an incredible, unimaginable series of events, including the formation of a super gang, a shooting, and TJ's return trip to prison. Discover TJ's story on Motive. It's a new podcast from WBEZ and the Chicago Sun-Times. You can listen and subscribe now at suntimes.com/motive. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show. Mr. Joravsky, take us home.
Okay, we'll do. Brandon Johnson in the studio with me, Chicago Teachers Union. Used to be an organizer for that. What's your connection with the Teachers Union these days?
You know, I don't know what my title is anymore, Ben. I think the best way I can describe it is this is my little shot to get in the baseball conversation. I'm like a short, you have like a short center field.
Yeah.
You know, that person who plays right behind the infield and right in front of the outfielder.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I do.
I see.
For the
Okay.
CTU. I get it when the infielders can't get it, and I get it when the outfielders can't get it.
All right, very good. Well, that sounds like that's a lot to put on a business card, but get it when the infielders can't get it or the outfielders can't get it. And he's also Cook County Board Commissioner. He was elected last November, I want to say. The big race was, of course, in March, the primary. All right, and Brandon, speaking of which, let's say, so the teachers have been out for not even a full day. And what's been the response of your fellow elected officials? Generally when there's a teacher strike, this goes back in time when Mayor Washington was the mayor, Mayor Daley Daddy Daley was the mayor, and then the last teacher strike. A lot of elected officials a little nervous. They don't want to offend an all-powerful mayor. 2012, it's hard to find many aldermen that would stand with the teachers against Mayor Rahm. So let's fast forward today. What's the feedback you're getting from your fellow elected officials?
Yeah, many of our elected officials are standing in complete solidarity with CTU Local 1 and SEIU Local 73. It's a much different political environment, and that has a lot to do with the organizing that we've been doing for the last 10 years and really pushing our political space to actually be responsive to the working class families of Chicago and, quite frankly, all of Illinois. So you're right. Back in 2012, you had the Black Caucus, the Latinx Caucus. They wrote op-eds against us. You had pastors writing op-eds against us. We don't have that today. Many of the state legislators have signed on to a letter of support that will be released to the mayor, I believe, tomorrow, if it hasn't already. The Cook County Board of Commissioners, with some help and some leadership from a couple of my colleagues, have put together a letter of support saying support the children of Cook County. That letter will be delivered at some point today or tomorrow. There are aldermen, of course, who have been elected because of this platform. They have signed on, and that's the right thing to do. Our wards win. Our representative districts win. Our legislative districts win. Our county districts win when there is a nurse in every single school, right, every day. And, sort of the fear interpretation that people have had politically and historically in this city, quite frankly, has crippled and has caused tremendous disaster in our neighborhoods. It's been that type of lack of courage that has decimated the very existence of many of our communities. I live in Austin. It used to be the largest community in the entire city. It's now second to where Rahm Emanuel lives. That's not a coincidence. That has everything to do with the disinvestment, the concentration of poverty that exists in the community that I not only live in, but I represent. And so there is far more urgency that has propelled elected officials to be more responsive to the needs of working class families. If I can be very transparent here, sometimes elected leaders are afraid to lead because they are afraid of losing. But we have to have a different political.
What do you mean by that? Afraid to lead because they're afraid to lose. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So historically, a lot of the power has been concentrated into a couple of offices. Of course, you have the mayor of Chicago being a very powerful position that controlled and dictated where resources would go. But it also controlled like where campaign finances would go. And you didn't want to be a target by the mayor of Chicago if you went against their agenda. And so now there is a space that is developing, and you're seeing this with the UWF here in Chicago, United Working Families, where there's a place where progressive and left candidates who support the interest of working class families, black, brown, white, North Side, Rogers Park, Roseland, and everybody else in between, that if you actually step out and lead, step out with some courage, that even if you were to take a political hit for doing that, that the working class families in your community, they'll have your back. And that's what we've demonstrated. That's how Jeanette Taylor gets elected. That's how I get elected. Byron Sigcho Lopez, that's how he gets elected. And go on, where you now have several Democratic socialists who are serving on the city council. You got good folks on the county board of commissioners. You got folks in Springfield now that have been bold in their approach towards how we actually transform the lives of people. And the political response that we're seeing right now has a lot to do with our ability to demonstrate that we can win when we stand up to powerful forces. We can win when we stick together, of course. And that's encouraging. And if you're not on the right side of this issue, there are some elected officials that recognize that if they're not on the right side of this issue, they're going to have problems. And it's not about like someone coming after your office, right? It's not about that. But you're going to have problems being able to deliver goods and services to your community. When you don't lead, that's how schools close. And when you don't lead, that's how mental health clinics close. When you don't lead, this is how you end up with communities that have unemployment that has reached Great Depression era numbers. When you don't lead, you have pervasive violence that grips the life out of people who are just trying to survive when you don't lead. But when you do lead, you have a moment like today where a system that has been morally bankrupt and corrupt over generations is now saying, you know what, we got to do something about stuffing a bunch of kids in the classroom. That was the fight that Al Raby led a generation ago.
Yeah, no, I must concede it's a first. I cannot recall a teacher strike over class size or a teacher strike over wraparound employees like nurses and social workers and librarians. I've lived through a lot of teacher strikes in the city of Chicago, and usually they're about wages. And what's interesting about this current strike is that Lori Lightfoot led with the raise. All right. She said, we're going to give you a generous raise. And the editorial boards of both downtown papers said, take the raise, teachers, take the raise. And Tribune was saying, take the raise or she'll pull it from you, knock you over the head, beat you up, take you in the alley, et cetera, and so forth. And the teachers are still going. I've never seen a situation like this, Brandon. It's also illegal. I should point this out. The law that you just alluded to a little while ago that was passed to benefit Mayor Richard M. Daley, Baby Daley, the Daley that ruled in the 90s, that McGill-DeVille voted against, irony of ironies, is the very law that keeps teachers in Chicago from bargaining about class size or bargaining about nurses or social workers, et cetera. I think that the only collective bargaining unit in the state that has that limitation. So that's like a trump card. You know what I mean? Like that Lori Lightfoot has over the teachers. Like if it gets really contentious, she may send her lawyers into court and say, all right, Stacey Davis Gates, you think you're so bad? How about going to Cook County Jail? Or, we're going to throw you in jail for. I hope it doesn't come to that, Brandon Johnson. I don't believe it'll come to that. If what you're saying is true, that they were making a movement today and maybe over the weekend they'll cut a deal, which will be announced on Monday, et cetera, and so forth. But that's the reality. That the teachers are striking over something that is a little foreign to most observers. We don't like most of the press corps are kind of cynical and jaded. Like, wait, they offered you some money. Why don't you just take the money?
Yeah, and look, there are some financial things that, of course, that we are still holding out for. I want to be clear about that. We have some of the lowest paid workers within our bargaining unit, as well as Local 73, where you have individuals who are making $30,000 a year, and that's before taxes, if not less. They have to raise a family in Chicago of 4. That's just not acceptable. But there are some things, of course, that we're fighting for, Ben, and that we're very clear about that. And having social workers and nurses and class sizes that are manageable, man, that's it's reasonable. I got a chance to speak at one of the schools in my district on the Indigenous Peoples Day on Monday. And I was in Oak Park River Forest High School and had a chance to talk to the civics class. And I said, hey, do you guys have nurses, social workers, counselors, and what class sizes? They were like, absolutely. And so in my district, just a couple miles from one another, where the students on one side of Austin have 3 public libraries in the entire city. Every single school has a librarian, and every school has a social worker, nurse, and class sizes that are manageable. And just a couple of miles, like in Garfield Park, where that part of my district has been described as a developing nation, because the poverty and the violence per capita is akin to that of a developing nation. And so we got a chance to get it right. And so teachers, of course, other staff, support staff, they're taking an incredible risk. But why not do it now? Like, why wait? Let's invest in today, and allow that to ring true for generations to come. Let this set us up for the next set of fights that we have to have, because she's going to have them, right? She's got the mayor. Yeah, she's got other challenges that she has to face. Why not have partners of the working class folks in this city?
Well, Brandon, that's something I don't understand. Maybe you can help me here. Mayor Lori Lightfoot was elected in April. We are in October. I know that the Chicago Teachers Union supported Toni Preckwinkle. I know that really hard. I feel you supported her too hard. I'm not sure Toni Preckwinkle warranted all the good love you poured on her, but that's water under the bridge. I'm not the one dictating to the Chicago Teachers Union their political strategy. That said, it's a long time to get over an election. And I'm just wondering why it wasn't possible for Lori Lightfoot to sit down with Stacey Davis Gates or Jesse Sharkey and just figure out, on their own in a choir setting, like how you can deal with these situations so it doesn't come down to lawyers feuding and a teacher strike. I do not understand. They're both members of all of them are Democrats. They may be like Amy Klobuchar Democrats as opposed to Bernie Sanders Democrats, okay? But they're all Democrats, right, Brandon? So I don't get it. Why this inability for two groups of Democrats to reach some kind of accord?
Yeah, you know what, and Ben, I think, to that question, when this is settled, and we will settle this contract at some point, we're still going to have to do that, right? Because there's the enforcement of this contract. There's a budget that she has to figure out. There are revenue ideas that we have always had in this city. We hope that she takes up some of those revenue ideas so we can begin to expand services and create more opportunities for affordable housing in this city. Otherwise, we're going to lose an entire region, an entire group of people. It's not a coincidence that as black folks are being pushed out of Chicago, forced out, we're also seeing the decimation of the black workers. And that's in all sectors, right? And so the hope is that as the educators sit down and figure this thing out, let the politicians step aside, except for me, because I'm a unique one. Just saying. You got to make room for a brother, especially because I've been in the classroom.
Yeah.
Everybody else
steps aside.
But I got this. But no, seriously, let the educators figure this part out. And then when it's time to build like the larger political movement to elect a school board in Chicago that the mayor says she agrees with, let's restore the collective bargaining rights to educators. The mayor says she agreed with that. She should back away from that and allow that process to take place in Springfield. Let's fight for the progressive revenue that we're going to need. Even if this passes in Springfield, which we're hopeful, we won't see the benefits of that revenue until 2023.
Which revenue are you talking about?
The progressive revenue.
The fair tax?
Fair tax. Yeah.
Yes. That's okay.
It's a little ways away.
That's a ways away.
That's a harsh reality. And so let's think creatively of how we can generate revenue in the city of Chicago in the meantime. And there are progressive ways in which we can do that. That's another topic, another show. But to your point, when you have agreement around how to bring equity in the city of Chicago, when you finally have agreement, let's get it done. And the only thing that she needs to do at this point is to make sure that she instructs her team. Let's figure this out. Let's put it in writing. Let's set a new course for Chicago. She gets to be a hero. She does. She gets to earn that right to say that I was the mayor to deliver. She gets to do that. And we're going to help push her along. If that's what it takes, that's what it takes, clearly. It shouldn't have to take a work stoppage. It shouldn't. My children had a chance to participate this morning. Of course, they had a lot of questions. My daughter broke her arm a couple of weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. She didn't know every kid didn't have a nurse in their building. She didn't know that. That was foreign to her. She didn't know that. And thank God there was a nurse that day. But the nurse at our school is privatized. That's another conversation. But the point that I'm making is that we can set a new course in the city of Chicago so that every child, if they get hurt, they have an asthma attack, or if they experience trauma, that there are support systems in place. Don't send people back to work without more adults in the building. Don't do it. Don't do it. And then commit to it, put it in writing like everything else. And let's hold ourselves accountable to it.
All right. So the good news is that there was movement today, that the negotiators for Lori Lightfoot put something in writing that you could respond to. Is that
around class size?
Around class size.
Still have a little ways to go in terms of a hard cap, but there's something there that we can work with.
And what about the wraparound, what they call wraparound employees, the nurses, et cetera, and so forth?
Well, let's see what happens after the rally. So we're taking a little break here. We got to get people moving around the city a little bit just for some exercise, and they all happen to have on the same colors. Right? We call that a march. So that's happening right now, and they'll get back to the table this afternoon and move into the evening, and hopefully they'll provide a serious set of proposals, a response to that issue. I have to be hopeful. I mean, that's the nature of my existence, and as a middle school teacher, you kind of have to be hopeful and optimistic. If you ever taught middle school children, you gotta be hopeful.
No, Brandon John, I always tell you this to Stacey Davis Gates. I recognize myself, and Brandon, he's a young feller, but I see a lot of myself, and you're a conciliatory person by nature. So I always said, but put Brandon in the room with Lori Lightfoot. They could get along a little bit. So maybe maybe the teachers union will listen to me on this point.
Yeah.
And because I do see it in so many. We'll switch out of the teacher strike for a moment, Brandon, and talk national politics. But I do see it. It just reminds me of the debates that are going on at a national level with the Democratic Party, where you have a progressive force represented. Let's say Bernie Sanders is the best known person, and Elizabeth Warren, your candidate, is also there as well. And then you have the more centrist candidates. I always teasingly say Amy Klobuchar because she seems to be the main centrist, and Mayor Pete. Stacey Davis is good. Stacey Davis Gates, good friend from South Bend, Indiana. Just kidding there. And they represent the more centrist view of the Democratic Party. And it just it seems as though I'm never quite sure if the centrists in the Democratic Party really believe the things they say, or they're just saying them because they think that's what you have to say to get elected. Do you follow me? There's a distinction. Whereas I believe that Bernie, when he says what he's been saying the same thing, for goodness sake, since 1970s, he really believes it.
Yep.
And so right. What I don't know about Lori Lightfoot, I don't know what Lori Lightfoot believes. When she ran, you're right. When she ran, I know when she sat across the table from me, when I was interviewing her, she was agreeing with me about Lincoln Yards, for instance, which got a $1.3 billion. I know she said we need more nurses, and she talks about her working class roots in Ohio and how she comes from a family of union people. So I have to believe, I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt. I don't know Lori Lightfoot. So I don't know why people don't govern the way they believe is what I'm throwing out there.
No, it's a good question, and it's fair. And Ben, I don't know if I have a straight answer for you, but I will say this to your point, though. It's like you have people who run as Frederick Douglass, and then they govern as like Jefferson Davis. I know that's for your social studies teacher.
Yeah.
I know that's quite
that's a real stretch.
But I think the point is they'll run in a particular sort of abolitionist movement, and then it's like, well, maybe we should slow the process down. Yeah. Maybe not all the slaves to be set free, right? Just some of them. And so, I don't appreciate it. I can tell you that much. Like, no one wants to be hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, lied to. No one wants that. I made promises on the campaign trail. I'm going to hold to them. And I've been clear about protecting public services, protecting public accommodations, expanding them, protecting those that actually do the work, making sure that there's dignity in that work, and then making sure that those who have benefited from this economy pay their fair share in taxes. It's just that simple. And so whether it's Lori Lightfoot, who, can't quite figure out, like what or who she wants to be, especially when it comes to leading this city. That's why you have to have a movement, because regardless of who sits in any of the seats, if they're honored and blessed enough to do that, you still have to hold people accountable to it. Don't think that my wife of 21 years doesn't still hold me accountable to my vows 21 years ago.
Okay.
I'm just saying, I think that's one of the most perfect unions that I've ever been a part of. I mean, seriously, I love my wife dearly, and I know she didn't like me that much today. I know, and I won't try to get free marital counseling on your show today, but
I'm full of it.
but we make promises, and then when we don't live up to the expectations that people who are in our lives to hold us accountable, when we don't live up to those expectations, it is their right to say, no, that's foul. That's wrong. And I know you can do better. Now, whether or not Mayor Lightfoot can do better, we'll find out.
Well, the reality is that Mayor Lori Lightfoot was elected with a huge man, 75% of the vote, I want to say, or 70%, I can't remember at the moment. And the quote-unquote progressive forces in the city lost in that election. And that was, I don't want to redo the April 2019 election. There really was no great, in my humble opinion, brand progressive champion running in that race. So it was a little disadvantage. But maybe, that's at the back of her mind, that there's no need to join, let's say, Carlos Ramirez Rosa or, the new Jeanette Taylor at the forefront of Bernie Sanders-like progressive proposals and ideas, because the progressives lost. I mean, you talk about the political considerations that politicians make, that may be in the back of her mind. So,
yeah, again, I don't know what she's thinking. What I can say, though, is we can help people become a little better. We can. It doesn't mean that you're going to change their ideology. People are who they are. They believe what they believe. But there are cases, and we're experiencing that right now. Someone who doesn't want to do something, even though she promised to do it, I'm talking about the mayor, that has to be pushed to do it. And I don't want to have to do that, right? I mean, just going to be honest with you. It shouldn't take that much, especially given the circumstances that many of us are enduring. But what I can say, though, is as a result of this work, that you're seeing significant movement, and I'm clear, quite frankly, about the mayor's ideology, her true ideology. I do know that sometimes people experience some level of maturation, but in many cases, they hold to their values, and they don't want those values disrupted. And what we're simply saying is, if we don't shift right now in this political economy, giving people an opportunity to go to a school that's fully resourced, that the disruption that's going to cause for a generation far outweighs whatever slight inconvenience the mayor feels or what we feel as parents, that this is the right thing to do. It's the right time to do it, and we are the right people to lead it.
All right, Brandon Johnson, well put. Before I let you go, just your thoughts. I know you endorsed the last time in your show. You came out and said you were you're supporting Elizabeth Warren. Your thoughts about the debate the other day?
Yeah, it's amazing because the last time I was here, I endorsed Elizabeth Warren. She was not the front runner. She clearly is the front runner now.
That's the power of Brandon Johnson on the Ben Joravsky show, right there.
And boy, did she have to swing the other night ago, right? And so, look, I think that this is still going to be a very robust presidential primary. I am glad and actually encouraged that Senator Sanders is healthy and looks like he's getting stronger each day.
Yeah.
I think he's an important voice in the political sphere right now. I thought the debate was the only part that was really troubling about the debate, honestly, is this is going to come across a little petty.
But
Amy.
Amy. You know, Amy Klobuchar.
Bad.
Yeah. Why? Why do you say that?
Okay, so this is probably not the sharpest thing to say politically over the air, but because this is your show, Ben, and this is what we do on your show.
Okay.
It was fascinating to watch another white woman say, "It shouldn't be that white woman. It should be me." Like Amy came across as someone like envious and jealous of the fact that she was not getting enough attention. And the only way she could get attention was by calling out the perfection of Senator Elizabeth Warren. Mm-hmm. You know, you're not the only one with plans. Yeah. You know, I got plans too. Yeah. You know, and to me, it's like, look, if there's a difference between you and another person on the stage, then just state the difference. You know, but I thought that was
the line that she had, which was clearly drafted before. You know, I'm really too old to talk about this, but I years ago I wrote a story about rappers who would have these battles, these epic battles. All right, and you're not supposed to have a pre-written line. Okay, it's got to be. This is what little I know, Brandon. And this one guy claims he beat Eminem. What's it called? When Eminem dropped a line that he had already had pre-written, or I forget what the rap.
It's called a rap battle.
Yeah, it's a rap battle. But when a rapper,
it wasn't freestyle. I get your point.
It drops a line, so clearly Amy Klobuchar had that line planned. There's a difference between plan versus a pipe dream. Yeah. That was her Eminem moment. Yeah. And she dropped the line. I was like, hey, wait, technically that's a violation of freedom. I mean, again, this is obviously a topic for a greater discussion at another time when you come back, Brandon. But the notion that Democrats, I just shake my head. My beloved Democratic Party, a lifelong Democrat I've been. I never see Republicans pull back on what they believe in. As insane as what it is that they believe in, they never say that's a pipe dream, we can't achieve it.
Or Ben, they'll mock when one of us has a belief system that actually calls for something more bold and transformational. You saw Mayor Pete do that repeatedly.
Yeah.
Of course, you saw Senator Klobuchar do that repeatedly. To me, like, it really reduces and minimizes the real anguish and pain that people are experiencing, and that's what Elizabeth Warren was trying to get people to understand in that moment. Like, look, there are real stories of people who have like conditions that cannot be treated or they cannot afford to treat it. And so to make people believe that we are doing something wrong by making healthcare a guaranteed right is not only like a very petite view of like our political aspirations, it's actually irresponsible in this moment because the people of America want it.
Yeah, no,
and it actually doesn't. It cuts across ideological lines.
Yeah, no, that too. By the way, before we go, I just have to say one last thing. It has nothing to do with any. I really like the stance. Listen, I love the stance Nancy Pelosi has. I've taken a lot of heat from my brothers and sisters on the left because I love how Nancy Pelosi has stood up to Trump. Particularly yesterday, she stood up to him again. And Elijah Cummings was a key part of that congressional opposition to a very frightening and scary president who I think is losing his mind.
May he rest in peace. And he certainly initiated this resistance that we're talking about, calling for an impeachment, and took political heat for it.
Yes, he did. So a great man, Elijah Cummings. My condolences, family. Brandon Johnson, take my advice, Chicago Teachers Union. That's your guy. When this is settled, have him, be like the go-between with Lori Lightfoot.
We didn't get to talk baseball.
Washington
yeah.
Nationals.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with the Nationals.
Yeah, I'm with the Nationals because they beat the Cardinals. I was ecstatic.
It doesn't take much. Yeah.
He's a Cardinal fan.
Watch it, fellas. Watch it.
With a San Diego Padres hat on.
I know.
Hey, I got to make friends around here, all right?
Confused.
Does it match his shoes or something? Like, why does he have that hat on?
It's the most low-key team that you can wear and still get along with everybody.
Yeah, most people don't know what it means.
I walk around with the Cardinals hat. People are like, who's this douchebag? So I wear a say that people got a problem with Tony Gwynn?
I love Tony Gwynn.
The best.
Really fast, I think the Cubs were foolish to fire Joe Madden. Do you agree or disagree with me?
I agree with you.
Yeah, that's correct. Oh, thank you, John.
Congratulations. He's with the Angels now.
Yeah, he's with the Angels. What a stupid move by the Cubs. I just thought, of all the things that were wrong with the Cubs this year, it was not their manager. You agree with me on that one? All right. He's a Cub fan, by the way. People don't know that. Huge Cub fan. All right. Brandon Johnson, thank you so much. I also want to thank the other Johnson, Jeff Johnson. He did an outstanding job, as he always does. Kampf-Lassin from In These Times was here earlier today. We had a busy day today. It's not over yet. We have a bunch of bonus episodes we're going to tape, so get ready, Dr. D, all right?
Oh, you get ready. Our guests are here.
Oh, they're here already? Oh,
yeah.
Okay. That is Dennis from downstate Alton. Downstate Alton. They call him White Lightning. Give yourself a raise. Take it out of petty cash. See you tomorrow, everybody.
Hey, and remember, you can download previous Ben Joravsky shows and Benny J bonus interviews at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites, chicago.suntimes.com, chicagoreader.com, and wherever else you download podcasts. Tomorrow on the program, we're going to find out who's going to win our caption contest. It's an Alderman Ed Burke caption contest. The picture's posted on our Facebook page. It's one of Donald Trump talking to Ed Burke. Anybody can caption that. Send us your captions. We'll read them on the program tomorrow, and we'll find out who the winner is at Benny J Show. BENNY, the letter J Show, JORAV as in victory, SKY. We will see you all tomorrow.
Yay for our teachers! Yay for our teachers!